Chapter 1151. This is the capital. A lady with a wide forehead and a big mouth sat behind a tractor, looking at the towering city in the distance. Her words were full of emotion. She had a wide forehead and a big mouth, but when put together no one could find any fault with them. She was 25 or 26 years old and dressed ordinarily, but she was unforgettable. Her eyes were as bright as the stars. Beside her were a man and a woman. The man was strong and the woman was wild. One look and they could tell that she was an aboriginal. I haven't been back for a long time. There weren't so many cars in the past. The man looked around. On the 10-lane road from the capital to Lan City, there were all kinds of tractors and trucks. Now there were a few more models of tractors and trucks. In addition, he could occasionally see a large vehicle called a bus, which was full of people. There were even a few people sitting on the roof, looking at the city in the distance in amazement. I designed the tires of this tractor, the man boasted. If I hadn't shouldered the heavy responsibility of going to Great Xia, I would have been behind these vehicles. If he said this in another place, he would most likely be greeted with admiring gazes. However, at this moment only the aboriginal lady beside him kicked him and shouted, "Du Laolu, are you done? How many times have you said this along the way?" Laolu has indeed contributed a lot. The changes in Dayo can't be separated from your contributions. The other lady pursed her lips and smiled elegantly. Laolu? Are you two familiar with each other? The aboriginal lady said angrily and kicked Du Laolu again. Very familiar? In any case, we are classmates. The lady chuckled. Her eyes were shining and she seemed to enjoy watching the two of them play around. Or rather, one of them was fighting while the other was playing around. Qinglian, are you really not going back? Du Laolu, who was used to being kicked and beaten, turned to ask the lady. Seeing this scene, the aboriginal lady was even more furious. She gritted her teeth and made up her mind that she wouldn't let him off when they got home. The aboriginal lady was Du Laolu's wife, Tuyu. She had followed Du Laolu to Great Xia and returned together after 4 years. The other lady was Qinglian. Qinglian shook her head slightly and chuckled. Anyway, you don't need me anymore. There's no difference if I'm here or not. I should do what I want to do. After saying those words, he raised his head and looked into the distance with a slightly disappointed expression. Who would have thought that it would end up like this? He had planned for so many years and experienced so many trials and tribulations, but he did not know what it was all for. However, this was something that they had long expected. Ever since the Great Xia royal family produced a character who could split open the heaven and earth domain, they had already predicted that this day would come. Although that person was greatly restricted and couldn't go far, it was enough to stop the revolutionary army. After emptying her mind, Qinglian focused her attention on the imperial capital that was getting closer and closer. She smiled and asked, I heard that your highness is moving the wealthy families from the 100 cities to the imperial capital? I don't know about this. I haven't been back for a few years. Du Laolu shook his head. He had always been in Great Xia and didn't know about this. As they entered the imperial capital, there were more and more pedestrians on the road, especially on both sides of the road. Even at the periphery, it was still bustling. There were all kinds of shops around the city. Large amounts of goods were unloaded here and distributed to various shops in the city. Pedestrians, laborers, peddlers, shopkeepers, haggling, clamoring, and cursing filled the air. One of the shops was used to load all kinds of vegetables and fruits. After being loaded into trucks, they were sent straight to the city. A few laborers casually nibbled on the fruits before continuing with their work. It was a lively scene. There were vendors selling roasted sweet potatoes, roasted meat, and meat soup on the roadside. Smoke was drifting out from the buildings on both sides of the road. One could smell stewed meat and all kinds of fragrances. The combination of the two smells rushed straight into the nostrils and tempted one's appetite. I'm hungry. I can finally have a good meal. Du Laolu rubbed his stomach. Is Great Xia's cuisine not as good as Dayo's? Qinglian laughed. It's not as good as Dayo's. Du Laolu said decisively. Qinglian smiled without saying a word. Dayo's cuisine was filled with good spices. The fragrance of the food was overwhelming, but it masked the freshness of the food itself. Great Xia's cuisine rarely used spices. Instead, it focused more on highlighting the taste of the food itself. It could only be said that everyone had their own preferences. However, when it came to meat, Dayo had all kinds of spices that could suppress the fishy smell, which was slightly better than Great Xia's. Where are you going? Are you going to see the dean first? Du Laolu asked and got kicked again. No, I'm going to walk around the city first. I'll pay a visit tomorrow. Qinglian shook her head slightly, cupped her hands and bade farewell to the two of them. She then jumped off the tractor. She wanted to see what the capital looked like. Naturally, she had to see it with her own eyes. Still looking? Tu saw that Du Laolu was still looking even after Qing Lian got off the tractor. I just feel that she's a little pitiful. Du Laolu shook his head. Even though he was a little funny, arrogant, and carefree, he wasn't completely blind. Along the way, he could naturally see that Qing Lian was disappointed from time to time. Furthermore, she had left everything behind and came to Dayo alone. It was probably not going well for her. How do you know that she's pitiful? And that it has something to do with you? Tu said angrily. I'm the pitiful one. How did I fall for you back then? Because I'm smart. Du Laolu grinned, revealing a set of white teeth that were even reflecting light. I'll go to the palace first. Du Laolu said as he held onto his cloth bag. Go back and let them cook the meat first. Rinpochen was a little surprised to hear that Du Laolu was back. This time he didn't receive any news from the rearguard commandery. As far as he knew, there hadn't been anything going on with the Du family recently. He didn't know if Du Laolu had found what he wanted or if he simply wanted to come back to take a look. However, he would find out when he saw Du Laolu. Lowly, after years of universal education, the national treasury is running low. I'm afraid that we will be in the red this year by 30%. What do you think? Rinpochen looked at the lowly in front of him. 3 years had passed, and the image of this artificial intelligence hadn't changed at all. Her personality was still as bad as before. At this moment, she was drawing circles on her lips with her finger, and her eyes were blurry. Fortunately, he wasn't a lolicon. Seeing that Rinpochen was asking about serious matters, the lowly winked at him and pulled down her collar. Anyway, it was just a flat screen, and it wouldn't be obvious if she didn't pull it down. If we want to enrich the national treasury, open up new sources of revenue, or reduce expenditure, the number of officials in Dayo isn't overstaffed. In fact, it can be said that there is still a huge shortage. For example, the transportation department and the commercial department are still understaffed. With the current number of soldiers, it is difficult to maintain a large area in the 60,000 mountains, so reducing expenditure isn't advisable. In that case, what we need to do is to open up new sources of revenue. If we want to open up new sources of revenue, firstly, tax, and secondly, commodities. Currently, the domestic situation is stable, and the Chuyun residence is also stable. If we raise taxes, it will definitely cause an uproar. As for commodities, the current number of craftsmen and factory personnel is barely enough, and we really can't develop new products. Moreover, even if we manage to produce 1 or 2 products, it won't be able to make up for the current deficit. I know all of this, Rinpochen said in a deep voice. However, there are still a few ways. First, we can use government bonds, which I don't think anyone will be willing to buy. Lottery tickets are not bad, but Dayo doesn't prohibit gambling. This amount of money will be collected by the casino and the people behind it, and it will be better to give it to the imperial court. Another way is the Qin nation and Great Xia. Even though Great Xia isn't unified yet, the imperial court and the revolutionary army have already divided their territories, and it will be difficult for there to be any big changes for a period of time. Moreover, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. After 10 years of continuous war, a large amount of wealth has gathered in the hands of a small number of people. Rinpochen was moved and asked, how do we do it? As long as we sell the goods there. The people of Great Xia have a huge demand for Dayo's goods. In the past, the borders of Dayo were unstable, so they could still restrain themselves a little. Now that the two countries have divided their territories and the situation has stabilized, the demand will shift to other areas. We just need to sell some of the goods that were originally supplied to the country to those who have amassed a lot of wealth. However, there is one thing that must be settled in Dayo's currency. After that, we will use paper money to purchase a lot of goods. In this way, whether it's Great Xia or the Yun nation, we will only be creating wealth for the imperial court for a few years or decades. Rinpochen thought about it and roughly understood Lolita's thinking. The value of money was given by people, regardless of whether it was gold or silver. The value of Dayo's currency was even more obvious. Nowadays, large transactions were completely done with paper money, which could be printed as much as one wanted. However, for the stability of domestic prices, the imperial court couldn't print more paper money than it could bear. Otherwise, the country's newly formed and fragile economic system would inevitably collapse. However, if they had to use paper money to trade with the Qin nation and Great Xia, they would first have to exchange gold and silver for paper money. This exchange rate was set by the imperial court and they could profit from it. The same was true for the purchase of goods in the two countries. In this way they would earn gold, silver, and goods, but they would only circulate paper money in their hands. They could use this method to increase the amount of money issued, which would be consumed by the two countries, and the imperial court would naturally gain a lot of profits. The imperial court had already benefited greatly from the increase in the amount of money issued. After a few years, the currencies of the two countries were basically controlled by Dayo. This way they could gain a lot of profits from the two countries by manipulating the rise and fall of the currencies. If they were more ruthless, they could completely design a separate currency to be issued in the two countries to plunder resources and profits. This kind of economic plunder was faster than robbing with a knife. After a few years, it would be these two countries that would support Dayo. Of course, there were a few important points. First, the other party had to recognize this kind of currency. Second, the currency wouldn't be imitated. However, these 2 points weren't a problem for him. First of all, they might not understand the main points. Even if there were knowledgeable people who felt that something was wrong, they had to recognize Dayo's paper money under the pressure of the army, whether they were willing or not. Furthermore, Dayo's paper money was exquisitely made and easy to carry. Under strong pressure, it would probably circulate quickly between the two countries. There was no need to consider counterfeiting as they didn't have the strength to do so. After he understood, he asked for more details. It was more or less the same as what he thought. Rinpoche also made up his mind. First he set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Chapter 1152. Your Highness. When Du Laolu saw Rinpoche, he suddenly felt sad. He finally saw the dean again. To be more precise, he was finally back. Back then, the dean sent him far away with just 1 sentence. At first he thought it was good, but after a long time he began to miss his hometown. If he hadn't found what he was looking for this time, he didn't know how long he would have been wandering outside. You seem to have matured. Rinpoche sighed and then looked at him strangely. Have you reached Kismet heaven? One had to know that Du Laolu wasn't very talented. Otherwise he wouldn't have been sent to the academy. Although reaching Kismet heaven in his 20s wasn't considered fast, it wasn't too bad either. I fought a lot during my trip to Great Xia and broke through during one of those fights. Du Laolu was a little excited. He came back this time to show those bastards that he had also broken through to Kismet heaven. Life and death situations help to tap one's potential. Rinpoche sighed. With Du Laolu's poor talent, it was rare for him to reach Kismet heaven in such a short period of time after going through many hardships. This was probably why Du Laolu looked much calmer. Du Laolu had a strange expression on his face. When Tu knocked someone down, he ran over and kicked them a few times because they were rude. After a few kicks, he inexplicably broke through. How could he have gone through life and death situations? Of course he couldn't say this out loud. Instead, he puffed out his chest and said, although the journey was difficult, I finally achieved my goal and obtained something. I just don't know if it's the scroll that your highness needs. Bring it to me, Rinpoche said. Du Laolu took out an ancient scroll made of animal hide, placed it on the table and took a few steps back. Rinpoche reached out to take it. The surface of the animal hide was extremely delicate and soft, and it felt very familiar. He flipped to the front page and saw the words, all laws are one and the same. These 10 words twisted endlessly as if they were going to jump out of the page. When he focused, he saw the words twisting out and entering his sea of knowledge. It's indeed the ancient scroll of methods. Rinpoche closed the ancient scroll, closed his eyes, and erased the words in his sea of knowledge. There were 3 scrolls in the ancient scroll of methods. The first was the method of refining the body and the 5 elements visualization. The second scroll was the art of nourishing and cultivating the spirit. Since he had not even reached the earth embryo realm, he could only read a part of it. There should be a cultivation method for the spirit wheel realm at the back, and it should be able to open up the heaven and earth domain. Due to his lack of strength, he was unable to see what was going on, so he could only make guesses. The third scroll contained all sorts of wondrous techniques and battle techniques. Now that the 3rd volume was in his hands, his set of techniques was finally complete. He looked down at Du Laolu, smiled and said, you are indeed a lucky general. Without a goal, he actually managed to get his hands on the ancient scroll of methods in just 4 years. Du Laolu grinned as he accepted Rinpoche's praise. You haven't been back for many years. Go back and rest for a few days and I will arrange something for you to do. Rinpoche smiled as he thought about where to send Du Laolu. A person with such great luck would naturally have the help of the heavens. It would be best to leave some clueless matters to him. Rinpoche couldn't make up his mind because there were too many places where he could be of use. Scientific research naturally required a certain amount of luck, and he could also be used in the search for ores and resources. There was also the map obtained from the tomb of the human emperor, or he could go out to sea to look for shipping routes. There might be unexpected gains. As for the Empress, he should be able to play a certain role if he was sent there. From the current situation, Du Laolu was just extremely lucky, but he wasn't the kind of person who could resist the heavens and earth. Sending him there wouldn't bring danger to the Empress and the others, and he might even be able to play a big role. Your Highness, Qinglian has also arrived in the capital. She probably won't return to the volunteer army, Du Laolu said before leaving. Ren Baqin nodded. Currently, neither the Great Xia Imperial Court nor the volunteer army could do anything to the other. There was a practitioner in the Great Xia Imperial Court who had reached the level of opening up heaven and earth, but he was restricted by some unknown restrictions and couldn't go far. With such a person around, the volunteer army couldn't overthrow the Great Xia Imperial Court. In this way, both sides would stabilize the occupied territory, divide the land, and think of other ways in the future. For Deo, this was good news. As for Qinglian, her goal had never been to be a high official and generous salary. She had other desires. Now that both sides had divided the land, there was no point for her to stay there, so she might as well come to Deo. Ren Baqin naturally understood what was going on, which was why he was happy. Qinglian could be said to be a great talent. She was shrewd, resourceful, and extremely talented in mathematics. There were a lot of positions that she could get involved in. Furthermore, based on his understanding of her, she was trustworthy and wasn't someone with ulterior motives. Now, he was in desperate need of talents, and he was naturally happy that such a talent had come to him. Ren Baqin stuffed the ancient scroll into his pocket and was ready to return to his bedroom to read it properly. However, he met Xianzhe on his way back. Seeing that she seemed to have something on and couldn't speak, Ren Baqin asked, "General Xianzhe, are you looking for me? I just wanted to ask if the electric shock experiment still needs to be done." Xianzhe said in a cold voice as her gaze wandered behind her glasses. Ren Baqin's body stiffened slightly. It seemed that Xianzhe had asked him once a few days ago. All these years he had also conducted several electric shock experiments on Xianzhe, about once a year, and it seemed to have become a regular pattern. Seeing that Xianzhe's cold face was slightly red, her gaze wandered, and she forced herself to remain calm. Ren Baqin found it funny and said, "The experiment still needs to be done. The data isn't enough, and the fluctuations are too big each time." A moment later, the two of them were in a side hall. Xianzhe put her armor and glasses aside, sat on the electric chair in a sports vest and tights, and allowed Ren Baqin to connect the electrodes to her body. Without her glasses, she couldn't distinguish between a man and a woman if she was more than 2 meters tall, and she couldn't distinguish between a man and a beast if she was more than 5 meters tall. Moreover, she had worn her glasses for a long time, and taking them off suddenly made her feel extremely unsafe, making her feel uneasy. She then felt the cold touch of the electrodes on her body and knew that the prince was looking at her. There was an indescribable feeling of anticipation in her heart, which made her feel shy and a little excited at the same time. As the switch was pressed and the intensity of the electric current was increased, Xianzhe couldn't help but let out a light moan, and the surface of her skin turned rosy. 20 minutes later, Xianzhe let out a long, mellow moan that sounded like she was crying. Her muscles tightened for a moment before she slumped there without any strength. Ren Baqin saw that Xianzhe's eyes were blurry and that her body was flushed. He knew that she probably wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. He had to admit that Xianzhe was extremely attractive at the moment. She was like a ripe fruit with a fragrant smell that made people want to pluck it and taste it. Such a woman made people want to conquer her. Fortunately, Ren Baqin had good self-control. Most importantly, he knew that rabbits wouldn't eat the grass near their nests, especially when this grass was particularly obvious. After removing the electrodes and putting away the equipment, he said, "General Xianzhe, take a rest first. I'll go back and record the data." He turned around and returned to his bedroom. After Ren Baqin left, Xianzhe heaved a long sigh of relief. Her thoughts were light as a feather, as if they could float with the wind. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1153. Ren Baqin opened the ancient scroll of methods once again and looked at it with rapt attention. He saw the 10 words on the first page wriggling incessantly on the animal skin. Following which, the words separated from the animal skin and entered his sea of knowledge, evolving into a set of methods to deal with the enemy. Or it could be said that there were several simple uses of the divine sense. Most importantly, there was a method to temper one's divine sense. Spiritual sense spread throughout the sea of consciousness. It was the foundation of a person. If it was not condensed into a divine weapon, it would be like smoke when it left the body, uncontrollable. This technique allowed one's divine sense to form an invisible arrow before it could be condensed into a divine weapon to attack the opponent's divine sense. The second volume of the ancient scroll of methods was to nurture and refine the spirit. Nurture first, then refine. The nurturing art was naturally to strengthen the divine sense, while the refining art was to purify and condense the divine sense. This was especially so for the nurturing path, which required one to start cultivating from the earth wheel level. Therefore, those who cultivated this technique had a much stronger divine sense than others of the same cultivation level. Only then could they use this divine sense attack method. The method of tempering that part of the divine sense wasn't a refining technique, but a simplified version of it. When one was at the earth wheel level, it would be able to resonate with the method of condensing the shapeless arrows and produce 3 shapeless arrows. This was also the only attack method of this technique before the earth embryo. After reaching the earth embryo realm, there would be 5 more ways to attack the 5 elements. He would use his consciousness to evolve the 5 elements and leave his body. Among them there were also the 5 words, eternity depends on one's heart. Only when one's heart was resolute could one achieve eternity. To put it simply, it was a firm belief. In the earth embryo realm, the 5 elements could only be evolved into one thing. Only by having a firm belief in it would one be able to concentrate and turn illusion into reality. This was all that Rinpoche could see at the moment, and he gasped in amazement. This method of turning illusions into reality, using one's divine sense to communicate with one's primordial chi and turn it into matter, was indeed miraculous. Although it was similar to condensing a divine armament, there were many more ways to do it. Furthermore, this was only the earth embryo realm. Once he attained the spirit wheel realm, it was unknown what kind of techniques he would have. If this technique was cultivated to the extreme, it was unknown whether or not it could condense a nuclear bomb. One had to know that when one reached the earth chakra level, they would visualize the 5 elements. However, what Rinpoche visualized was a universe. He didn't know what kind of changes would occur in the future. However, he seemed to have a lot of potential. Materializing a world was something he did not even dare to think about, nor was it possible. However, if he continued to cultivate, he might be able to regain his authority as a husband one day. When Rinpoche thought of this, he felt great. Just as he was about to enter visualization, he felt as if there was an additional hole in the palace. All the air was pouring into that hole. When he sensed it again, he realized that it was the palace where 2 flowers lived. Has Duo Hua reached the cardinal heaven level? Rinpoche looked up at the sky and saw that it was already dark. He hurriedly left the palace and headed in the direction of the hole. Your Highness. He saw Xenja standing in front of the palace courtyard. There was no lingering emotion on her face, and there was no change in her gaze either. It was as if nothing had happened. Is it Hua? Rinpoche asked immediately. Yes, Princess. Xenja replied. To advance to the cardinal heaven level? Rinpoche asked again. This was the first time he was in close contact with someone who had advanced to the cardinal heaven stage. Princess has long reached perfection. Today you have finally broken through that obstacle. Now, the chi and blood in your body have fused together with your vital energy, turning into blood essence. Your Highness should instruct the imperial kitchen to prepare more food. After all, the princess is hungry now. Rinpoche nodded and gave the order. Immediately, someone went to inform them. Duo Hua needed to prepare at least 500 kilograms of meat to replenish the chi and blood in his body for this breakthrough. Rinpoche stood in front of the palace and waited for Duo Hua to complete his breakthrough. After standing there for a while, he suddenly felt something moving under his feet. He carefully sensed it for a long time before he realized that when Duo Hua broke through to the cardinal heaven level, not only did the wind and clouds move, but the earth fetus also moved. The earth was like a living creature that breathed in and out vital energy. So this is the movement of the earth fetus. No wonder it's called the earth fetus. Rinpoche was overjoyed and laughed loudly. He originally thought that he would need to accumulate a little more, but he didn't expect it to happen so naturally now. After walking through the path of heaven, one's divine sense could communicate with the vital energy of heaven and earth, ignite the wisdom palace and reach the spirit wheel level. He already knew about this. At this stage, one's divine sense was the main focus and was no longer the same as an ordinary person. Before reaching the path of heaven, one would first be able to feel the earth fetus move automatically. Their heart would be one with the earth and move in accordance with the earth fetus. This would be the foundation for communicating with heaven and earth. Therefore, the top level of the earth wheel level was also known as the earth fetus level. Rinpoche had been accumulating and using countless precious herbs. Even though he was busy with work, he still took time out every day to take a medicinal bath and visualize. Today, when Duo Hua broke through, the earth fetus moved more intensely than usual, and he could feel the location of the earth fetus. After that, Rinpoche sat cross-legged on the ground and began to visualize. The vital energy in his body suddenly condensed into a ball and moved along with the earth fetus. His qi and blood began to transform into vital energy and attach to the essence fetus pill in his body. Wisps of earth fetus entered Rinpoche's sea of knowledge and floated in the boundless universe in his sea of knowledge. A portion of the vital energy that swept toward the palace hall was diverted into Rinpoche's body. Seeing this scene, Xanja was a little surprised. After looking at it for a moment, a smile appeared on her face. She turned around and asked someone to inform the imperial kitchen to prepare more meat. The two of them were absorbing vital energy here after breaking through. For a moment, two tornadoes, one big and one small, formed above the palace and sucked in all the air in the area. Although it was only limited to the palace, many people outside could sense it. Tong Jinya sat in his room, sensed it for a moment and grinned. The big one is the princess and the other is breaking through to the harmonious realm. Only Zhao Prince Consort can cause such a strange phenomenon. Zhao Prince Consort's cultivation speed isn't slow, but the princess is only 8 years old this year. Such talent is rare, and I have to prepare a generous gift for her tomorrow. Qing Lian was in the Honglu bureau. The long centipede on her back silently leaped out and stood in front of Qing Lian, trembling slightly. Oh? Someone in the palace has broken through to the cardinal heaven level? I don't know who it is, but I heard that the princess was born with the strength of a Kismet heaven expert and is extremely talented. It must be her. I have to find out more. Qing Lian was far away, and the flying sword only sensed that someone was absorbing vital energy in that direction. She didn't expect it to be two people breaking through. However, Rinpoche was only breaking through to the harmonious realm. Although the earth embryo realm was important, it wasn't worth too much attention. If he broke through to the spirit will level, then it would be considered a big deal. After 2 hours, the palace gradually stopped absorbing vital energy. When Erhua walked out of the palace, Rinpoche also slowly stopped. Father. Erhua's eyes were clear and sparkling like the stars. Rinpoche stood up and smiled. I'm borrowing your light. I'm hungry. Erhua's face twitched and he emphasized, I'm starving to death. A thunderous voice sounded from inside Erhua's body. Inform the imperial kitchen to send the meat here. Just send it here. Rinpoche laughed. After obtaining the fighting techniques from the ancient scroll of methods, Qing Lian jumped into the bowl, and Erhua and he had broken through. This was a happy occasion that needed to be celebrated. If the Empress was here, she would definitely be happy and congratulate them. Now that she was far away, he could only let her know through the radio. After the court session ended the next day, the important officials sent gifts to congratulate the princess on breaking through to the cardinal heaven level. Reaching the cardinal heaven level at the age of 10, and she might even be stronger than the Empress in the future, was naturally worth celebrating. Rinpoche simply waved his hand and held a banquet in the palace that night. He met Qing Lian in the afternoon. Sure enough, as expected, the Revolutionary Army and the Imperial Court of Great Xia were divided. Neither side could do anything to the other, and the situation had temporarily stabilized. Qing Lian saw that she had no hopes for fame and fortune, so she simply abandoned Su Qing and came to Deyo to study mathematics. Rinpoche originally wanted her to take up a position, but after discussing it with her, he agreed to let her teach at the Black Bamboo Academy. She would teach advanced mathematics and research mathematics at the same time. At the same time, she would be able to participate in some of the experiments and research at the academy. She was mainly in charge of mathematical calculations, which was of great use and could promote a lot of research progress. She was originally a classmate and the last transfer student to arrive, but now she had become a mathematics teacher. Naturally, this caused some trouble in the academy. In particular, Tong Lan, who had never been on good terms with her and even fought with her, almost broke her teeth from gritting them. Erhua had to stay at home for half a month to control her increased strength. With this breakthrough, Erhua's strength increased by more than 500 kilograms, and the power that she could unleash when she attacked increased several times. On the other hand, Rinpoche's strength didn't increase by much, only 100 kilograms. However, he still needed a few days to feel the pulse of the earth and stabilize his realm. Chapter 1154. On a mountain 50 kilometers away from the Wall of Two Worlds, the Empress was sitting in red. Behind her were the ferocious men from the martial arts hall, and not far in front of her were Li Fu and the others. Among them, the most eye-catching person was the one sitting cross-legged beside the Empress. He was covered in black armor and his face couldn't be seen clearly. There was only a ball of essence and blood protecting his chest that pulsed like thunder every 2 hours. His blood was like a river that had opened the floodgates. It flowed through Decan's body with a rolling sound and then returned to his chest. It was hard to detect from afar, but it was hard to even look at this person up close. It felt like the power in this person's body was like a volcano that could erupt at any time. This was the remnant body of the human emperor. It could be used 3 times and had 70% of its power at its peak. Even 70% of the human emperor's power was far greater than longevity heaven's. It could be said that he was the Empress's greatest reliance on this trip. The others didn't know that this was a remnant body, but they couldn't look at it directly when they got closer. They were secretly surprised and didn't know who this person was. "Do you mean that the news has been leaked?" The Empress raised her eyebrows and asked. 3 months ago, a foreign tribe went to the Jianghu tribe from the mountains and then left the tribe overnight to go to the outside world. Although they didn't get close, judging from their speed, they were using herdsmen. After that, the Jianghu tribe and the Earth Spirit tribe searched this area several times. We felt that something was wrong and retreated in time, so we weren't discovered by them. However, we couldn't hide the traces we left at the Wall of Two Worlds, and they already knew about it. We found an opportunity to catch a few of their hunting tribesmen. As expected, they already knew about our existence and were searching for us, Jianghu said. The Jianghu tribe was the foreign tribe with a scorpion tail and a row of bone spikes on its back. The tribe that was good at domesticating beasts called themselves the Earth Spirit tribe. Li Fu, Jianghu, and the others found out about this after catching people from the 2 tribes. The Empress's face darkened. They had spent so much effort but still couldn't seal the aura. "Do you know how long it will take for the herdsmen to come after they go to inform us?" Jianghu said, "I don't know. The outside world is boundless, and the people we caught are the juniors of the foreign tribes. They don't know the specific situation of the outside world. They only knew from the caravan that they had to travel south for half a month to leave the barren land, where there were several tribes. If we can destroy these 2 tribes, we can get some information from the foreign experts. Moreover, after destroying these 2 tribes, the Wall of Two Realms will be completely opened, and we will only need to guard 2 gaps. That Earth Spirit tribe has a Longevity Heaven expert and a ferocious beast with Longevity Heaven strength. In addition, there were 22 Cardinal Heaven level foreign races and ferocious beasts. The Thousand Bone tribe had 3 Longevity Heaven experts and 13 Cardinal Heaven experts. The Empress said, "We of Mu from the human spirit experts from the barren land, Shi worlds from and Spirit and King Qi." As he spoke, Jianghu's gaze fell on the remains of the human emperor from time to time. If this person were to take action, it would not be difficult to exterminate these 2 tribes. Although he the spirit was he spirit the emperor world's king and of the god. S king dynasty spirit world's king the dragon of spirit star god, thousand and Wu. They must be used to fight against the enemy, not to be wasted here. Although 2 more people had entered the heaven and earth territory including him and Li Fu, there were 4 people. However, other than him who had reached the intermediate level, the others had only just entered the heaven and earth territory. They didn't know how long those foreign tribes had been in the Longevity Heaven realm, and they didn't know if there were any high-level Longevity Heaven experts. If they wanted to destroy the foreign tribes, it would be too dangerous and they would suffer heavy casualties. There were only so many human elites. Every one of them was a seed and couldn't be killed easily. Now, the first thing to do was to cross the Wall of Two Worlds and cultivate for a few years. Then, some of them would enter the heaven opening region. It would be best if they could reach the high-level Longevity Heaven before coming back to destroy these 2 foreign tribes. At the thought of this, the Empress told them directly. After all, except for the martial arts hall, the others belonged to the Go-Home organization and the Temple of Heaven, so it was difficult for them to make a decision. Even though the Empress was tough in the past, everyone here was an elite of the human race. They were here to fight against the foreign races. Even though she could suppress them now, there was no telling what kind of trouble they might cause in the future. The Empress was well aware of this. After hearing what the Empress said, no one objected and agreed with her. In this case, we only have 2 choices. One is to cross the Wall of Two Worlds and find a place nearby to cultivate. We will come back to replenish our food and water from time to time. The second choice is to cross the barren land and find a place to cultivate. Although we can't come back to replenish our food, there are tribes there, so we don't have to worry about resources. Jianghu and Dongwasun are both good at concealing their tracks. After they go out, they can also check out the situation in the outside world and the strength of the foreign tribes. With our speed, it naturally won't take as long as half a month. If everything goes according to plan, we can reach there in 2 or 3 days at most. However, we can't stay in the outside world for too long and can't be too far away from those tribes, in case the experts of the foreign tribes come. Without us around, I'm afraid no one in the human race can stop them, Ma Hongyu said in a low voice. Ma Hongyu had already analyzed the situation clearly. Everyone was a smart person, and they analyzed the pros and cons after some consideration. After a discussion, they decided to cross the barren land. Everyone immediately prepared for a day. The Empress also took advantage of this time to contact Rinpoche through the radio and told him about their decision. In the afternoon of the next day, the Empress asked some of the winged cavalry warriors and doctors to stay behind while the rest returned to Wuxia city. Even those who stayed behind had to retreat another 150 kilometers to the north. A distance of 150 kilometers in the mountains was better than flat ground, and they would be far away from the hunting areas of the two foreign tribes. At night, the Empress didn't need to borrow any strength. She took a step into the air and walked toward the top of the wall of two worlds as if she was walking on air. Everyone was surprised to see this. Li Fu didn't even have the ability to walk on air, but the Empress could. It was obvious that the Empress could beat Li Fu, who was the world's most powerful expert. The rankings in the world should change. However, at this point, no one cared about the rankings anymore. When the Empress reached the top of the wall of two worlds, she threw a thin nylon rope down from the air. Everyone borrowed the force to get to the top of the wall, put away the rope and disappeared into the night. After walking and stopping for 2.5 days, the Empress finally saw that the scenery in front of her was no longer scorched black, and she could see a line of green on the horizon. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Finally, we are going out. I have had enough of this barren land. The most important thing was that the land of this barren land always carried traces of fire energy. When people walked on it, they would slowly absorb the fire poison into their bodies. It was as if something was stuck in their bodies, making them feel extremely uncomfortable. They needed to eliminate it first, but after a while, the fire poison would be absorbed back into their bodies again. This barren land is nearly 1,000 kilometers wide. It is said that the human emperor resisted the foreign tribes in the past. He first fought a great battle and finally he brazenly self-destructed. If this legend is true, I really don't know how powerful the human emperor is. Just how powerful would those foreign race experts be? Gaoyi sighed. As soon as he said this, everyone's expression changed. If someone could really achieve such great power, they could easily destroy the human race. What could the human race use to resist them? No, there must be a reason for this. You don't know the specifics, so don't think too much about it. The Empress shook her head slightly. The remnant of the human emperor could exert 70% of its original strength, and the chi and blood in its body were as vast as the sun and surging like a volcano. It was indeed amazing. However, it definitely couldn't reach the level of 1,000 kilometers of barren land. What does Emperor Qi know? Tao Qian asked curiously. You will know in the future. The Empress didn't tell them about the remnant of the human emperor's body. At present, only she, Li Yuanzhu and Lin Dong knew about it. Along the way, everyone had to stop to rest and eliminate the fire poison because their bodies were invaded by the fire poison. Now that they could see the horizon in the distance, they perked up and finally walked out of the barren land after 2 hours. What greeted them was the vitality that was 30% more abundant than the areas they had passed through before. I didn't expect the vitality here to be so abundant. They had traveled from the 60,000 mountains to the barren land and then crossed the barren land to arrive here. The vitality in the surroundings had been increasing, making them feel like they had suddenly become rich and extremely excited. The Empress thought for a while and said, "This may not be the place with the most abundant vitality. This is still the periphery. The vitality in the depths must be more abundant." It's very likely. Everyone agreed. The vitality here is enough for us. Let's check if there are any tribes around and then find a secret place to cultivate in seclusion, the Empress said. They were all elites of the human race who had been cultivating in places with little vitality. It was unknown how much effort they had put in to get to where they were today. Their martial arts, temperament and self-awareness were all incomparable to those of the foreign races who had been cultivating in places with such abundant vitality. Now that they were here, they felt that the calmness in their bodies had begun to loosen. They would probably be able to make progress in a short period of time. They rested for a while and ate some food to recover their energy and blood essence. Afterward, A few experts who were good at concealment and speed went in different directions. This is a good place. If I stay here for a while, I might be able to catch up with that person, Ju Puhua thought to herself. It wasn't that she had any thoughts about the Empress, but that she simply admired her and pursued power. Although the martial arts hall's villains obeyed the Empress's orders, they were both respectful and envious of her cultivation level. It would be best if they could catch up with her. Moreover, the people of the martial arts hall were also comparing themselves with each other. The Empress sat cross-legged on the ground and took a deep breath. If she was in the capital, this breath would be like a tornado or a kuan swallowing the sea. The wind and clouds within a radius of a kilometer would move. But here it was only within a radius of a few dozen meters. What everyone wanted was the vitality in the air. Vitality was originally scarce, and breathing it in would naturally have a great impact. That was why Erhua's breakthrough was so dramatic. As a result, when Erhua was born, it caused a stir in Wuji City. It was because the vitality on Earth was inferior to that of Dayo, and Dayo was far inferior to this place. If the triangle star field hadn't been discovered, the highest level of martial artists on Earth could only be at the advanced level of the Earth wheel. Eventually, because of the lack of vitality, the Earth veins wouldn't flourish, and they wouldn't be able to reach the Earth embryo realm. Now that the triangle star field had been discovered, the martial artists on Earth had a place to cultivate. Chapter 1155. A day later, those who had gone to investigate returned. There's a tribe 50 kilometers southeast of here with about 10,000 people. Among them, the mutants are only half a man tall. Their skin is gray, they have pointed ears, and there are many wrinkles on their skin. They are weak, and I think that their strength is about the same as our human race. The strongest among them is only at the cardinal heaven realm. This tribe doesn't rear any beasts and has planted a large area of vegetation. If we want to destroy them, we only need 3 to 5 people. It's the same for the tribe 150 kilometers southwest of here. They should be the same kind of mutants. The tribe is slightly bigger, but it's only about 10,000 people. There's also a tribe 100 kilometers south of here with about 8,000 people. We have seen this tribe before. It's the Giant Arm tribe. This tribe isn't weak, with at least 50 people at the Cardinal Heaven realm and 4 from the Longevity Heaven realm. The one who went to investigate the south was Dongwa Sun, who was best at concealment and could move in the shadows. Therefore, even though this tribe was very strong, he was able to get a rough idea. There are a total of 36 powerful tribes, 369 middle-grade tribes, and the rest are low-grade tribes. The Mastiffs used to be one of the middle-grade tribes. Those 2 weak tribes should be low-grade tribes. The Giant Arm tribe should be a middle-grade tribe. If I'm not wrong, they should be the low-grade tribes in the surrounding areas ruled by the middle-grade tribes. In a larger area, they should be the low-grade tribes in the areas ruled by the powerful tribes, the Empress said after pondering for a while. Emperor Qi's guess is right. When I was hiding in the dark and overheard the conversation of the Giant Arm tribe, I found out that this place is under the jurisdiction of the Stainless Heaven Lord, who is the strongest expert of the Wooding tribe, one of the 36 powerful tribes. Everyone's expression changed. What else did you hear? The Empress asked. There's a big city 5,300 kilometers south of here called Stainless City. It's the residence of the indestructible Heaven Lord. The tribes in the southeast and southwest should be called Grey Thorn. Every year they have to offer tributes to the Giant Arm tribe, and the Giant Arm tribe has to offer tributes to Stainless City every 3 years. This year is the year of the tribute, and I overheard it when someone from the Giant Arm tribe talked about it. Dongwa Sun said. You've done a great service, the Empress praised. It was just a coincidence of fortune, said Dongwa Sun with a smile. Dongwa Sun had obtained quite a bit of information during this trip, and it was especially related to the existence of Stainless City. At the very least, all of them were slightly prepared. Is there a suitable place for us to stay nearby? Li Fu asked. 350 kilometers to the west, there's a mountain range. Perhaps we can temporarily hide there. After circling around the mountain, we discovered that the alien vegetation only extends to the foot of the mountain. There are also ferocious beasts in the mountain and they aren't weak. Those gray thorns won't easily enter the mountain. That would be for the best. Everyone nodded. Then clean up this place. Don't let anyone know that we've been here. The Empress instructed. The ferocious men of the martial arts hall had been hunting in the mountains all year round. They were most adept at ambushing and cleaning up traces. Leaving 2 men to clean up, the rest of the men headed straight for the mountain range that was more than 150 kilometers away. In just 4 hours they arrived at the mountain range. This mountain range wasn't big and couldn't be compared to the 60,000 mountains at all. However, it was enough for everyone to hide. As soon as they entered the mountain range, they encountered a swarm of fist-sized wasps. Their stingers were like steel nails, had a metallic luster and had a fishy smell. Everyone immediately knew that these wasps must be extremely poisonous. Furthermore, these wasps were extremely fast, strong and tough. They were almost as strong as a man-wheel expert. Coupled with the fact that they were in groups, there were at least a few hundred to 1,000 wasps. When they flew over, they formed a dense black mass, and the sound of their flapping wings was like thunder. If one wasn't strong enough or had fewer people, they would have no choice but to retreat when encountering this swarm of wasps. Ma Hongyu raised her brush and drew a river that flowed down from the sky and rushed the wasps to one place. She then drew an earth energy to trap them within. However, these wasps were also ferocious. They all crashed into the yellow earth energy around them, causing the earth energy to tremble. If they were delayed for a moment longer, they might have escaped. Do it! Ma Hongyu shouted in a low voice. Fire Snake Tao Qian's first move was 2 fire snakes that wriggled in the air and twisted around the wasps. The wasps that were trapped in one place were all turned into ashes. These insects are really powerful. I almost couldn't trap them. Ma Hongyu said as she put away her brush. There's probably something good around here. Gluttonous Duke stroked his beard and smiled. You guys go first. I'll catch up later. After finishing his sentence, he went in the direction of the wasps. In just a moment, Gluttonous Duke caught up with everyone. He was carrying a beehive that was even bigger than him, and an alluring sweet smell came from it. Everyone chuckled when they saw his appearance. He was indeed worthy of his title as Gluttonous Duke. Everyone found a peak in the mountain range. From here they could barely see the direction they came from with binoculars. If someone passed by, they would be able to detect it as long as they didn't hide their aura and didn't move too fast. Furthermore, the vitality here was 10% thicker than at the foot of the mountain. It could be considered a treasure land. There's a ferocious beast in that direction. Based on its aura, I'm afraid it's close to the strength of longevity heaven, someone said as he looked to the west. It's only 1 mountain away from here. Why don't we kill it first to avoid trouble? Gao Yi, why don't you and I take a look? Li Fu stood up and said. In the past 3 years, among the people who had arrived first, 2 of them had broken through to the next level and entered the heaven and earth territory. One of them was Gao Yi with the spear. The other was Xian from the Life Transformation Celestial Sect. She was a man of few words. Her divine weapon was a treasure bottle that could release Life Transformation Celestial Qi to attack and trap enemies. However, in terms of attack, she was not as good as Gao Yi with the spear. After the 2 of them left, 2 people went to look for food and water. The others opened up caves on the mountain peak to hide and cultivate. They moved trees and vines to block the cave entrance. It was difficult to detect them from afar. They didn't even need to activate the 2 sets of air projection equipment used to hide their tracks. Li Fu and Gao Yi followed the aura and searched behind another mountain. From afar, they saw a white snake that was more than 20 meters long coiled on a huge rock. The most shocking thing was that there were 2 claws in front of the snake's abdomen. They were no more than a meter long. Noticing the 2 of them approaching, the giant snake coiled up and stared at them with a cold and fierce gaze. It made hissing sounds. I can deal with this thing alone, Gao Yi said with a relaxed expression. This giant snake was full of vigor. It would have been troublesome to deal with it in the past, but now that he had taken that step, he could not be compared to the past. One had to know that besides the martial arts and moves of a spirit wheel expert, their most powerful weapon was their heaven-grade weapon. After taking that step, they already had their own heaven and earth domain. The heaven and earth domain was a powerful weapon to deal with enemies. Even though he had just taken this step, it was incomparable to what he had done before. The heaven and earth domain of Xia Yonghe that the Empress had seen before was similar to his heaven-grade weapon. It was a domain with countless spears that could be used to block, trap, and kill the enemy. Gao Yi, on the other hand, was different. Gao Yi's heaven and earth domain could find the flaws in the opponent's aura within a certain range. If he were to fight with someone, he could easily find the opponent's flaws and predict the enemy's moves. Li Fu was different from Gao Yi. Li Fu's heaven and earth domain strengthened his ability to see the weaknesses of objects. This allowed him to see the weaknesses of the opponent's weapon or his own body. No matter how strong the opponent's body was, he could break it with one blow. In other words, Gao Yi could find the opponent's flaws, but if the opponent's body was strong enough, he might not be able to break it. On the other hand, Li Fu was the opposite. No matter how strong the opponent's body was, he could break it as long as he found its weakness. However, if he couldn't find the opponent's flaws, he might not have the chance to attack. Seeing that Gao Yi had taken the initiative to fight, Li Fu saved himself some effort. He immediately laughed and said, "My arms and legs are old and I want to rest." After he finished speaking, he found a place to sit. Coincidentally, there was a cluster of berries next to where he was sitting with bright red fruits hanging on them. Li Fu plucked a few of them, used his own method to determine if they were poisonous, and threw them into his mouth with a satisfied look on his face. Gao Yi was speechless when he saw Rinpoche eating melon seeds and watching the crowd. Fortunately, he wanted to familiarize himself with the heaven and earth domain and hone his combat skills. He calmed himself down and ignored Li Fu. 2 spears, one long and one short, appeared in his hands, and he walked into the attack range of the giant snake. He activated the chi activity in his body and combined it with his divine sense to sweep outwards. Immediately, he felt his 5 senses become clearer, and he could sense every movement within a 10-meter radius like the back of his hand. At this moment, Gao Yi felt a warning in his heart. His body swayed to the side and he just happened to dodge the white snake's attack. He raised the short spear in his hand and felt as if he had hit an extremely solid object. A string of sparks appeared on the scales of the white snake. The giant snake's attack missed, so it took the opportunity to coil around him. However, Gao Yi was already prepared. He turned his body 7 or 8 times and took advantage of the situation to move near the giant rock. His long spear touched one of the scales, and a bloody hole appeared on the giant snake's body. However, compared to the giant snake's body, this bloody hole was like a needle. At most, it felt a little pain, but the ferocity in its eyes deepened. It retracted most of its attention from Li Fu and attacked even more fiercely. The 2 sides fought for a while. Gao Yi attacked with his long spear and defended with his short spear. He either dodged or blocked, but the giant snake couldn't do anything to him. Instead, it suffered many wounds and bloodstains, and the surrounding trees and rocks were all swept away. The giant snake felt that something was wrong. The enemy in front of it was difficult to deal with, and it couldn't be compared to its previous opponents. Not far away there was another person who gave it an extremely dangerous feeling, and it wanted to retreat. However, just as it had this plan, Gao Yi sensed it and immediately stepped forward to entangle it. He attacked with the long spear in his hand, leaving it with nowhere to escape. However, after a while, Gao Yi found a flaw in the giant snake and stabbed it 7 inches deep. The giant snake was nailed 7 inches deep. It struggled and rolled around, sweeping the already messy surroundings again. However, Gao Yi's long spear was still nailed to Zhou Shi. After a while, it lost its strength and fell to the ground. Gao Yi jumped and stomped on the ground, nailing the spear directly into the giant rock. His body turned backward, and the short spear nailed into the giant snake's brain through its eye. The giant snake's body slightly twisted a few times and finally it stopped breathing. The 2 of them dragged the giant snake back. The snake was dozens of meters long, and its meat was also more than 1,000 kilograms. However, it was only enough for them to have a sumptuous meal. Next, they had to cultivate while looking for food. Fortunately, there was no lack of water and ferocious beasts in this mountain range. There were a few beasts with similar strength to this giant snake, but they were in deeper places. They didn't bother with them for now, and they could hunt them for a sumptuous meal in the future. Although one of the herdsmen went to inform them, everyone knew that the other party wouldn't arrive so soon. They took this opportunity to cultivate in secret, hoping to break through or advance further. Chapter 1156. In the following days, the Empress and the rest, as well as Rinpoche, were all immersed in cultivation. The place where the Empress and the rest were at was filled with vitality. Those who were stuck at the bottleneck felt the bottleneck loosen, and those who hadn't condensed a heaven-grade weapon communicated with each other from time to time or asked those who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon for guidance. In the past, in Great Xia, everyone lived separately. Other than a few good friends exchanging insights, how could there be such an opportunity to communicate with so many experts? Needless to say, those who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon and those who hadn't condensed one were like heaven and earth, and there were few opportunities to ask for guidance. Moreover, even if they did ask for guidance, they wouldn't say much. Many of their experiences were secrets that were passed down from generation to generation. However, it was different now. The foreign races were the enemies of the human race, and everyone was alone outside the human residence. If someone asked for guidance, they would be satisfied. Therefore, everyone learned something in a short period of time and started to condense a heaven-grade weapon. There were even a few people who didn't have the method to condense a heaven-grade weapon in their sects, but they swore not to pass it on to others. Otherwise, they didn't know how long it would take for them to take this step. A few months passed in a flash and everyone on the mountain quieted down. Other than occasionally looking for food or water, they rarely went out. Rinpoche had honed 3 invisible arrows these days. This was originally a method used before reaching the Earth Embryo realm. Now that Rinpoche had reached the Earth Embryo realm, it was even faster to return to practice. Moreover, he had died countless times while practicing Rui visualization, so his divine sense was much more tenacious than ordinary people. As a result, his cultivation speed was extremely fast. In just a few months he was able to condense these 3 invisible arrows. With a thought from him, one of the invisible arrows flew out of his body. Without any abnormalities, it circled in the air before returning to his sea of knowledge. These 3 invisible arrows only attacked one's divine sense and didn't affect objects in the real world. They couldn't be seen or touched, and even if they hit somewhere they would pass through without leaving a trace. However, by condensing one object from each of the 5 elements, one could condense the void into reality and attack objects in the real world. This ancient scroll of methods is so closely linked. First I practiced Rui visualization, died countless times and condensed my divine sense. Next I recuperated and condensed the invisible arrows. Previously, when he was resting, he needed to visualize the 5 elements and see how they evolved and changed. Then he would condense the 5 elements and create something out of nothing. He didn't know what kind of person could create such a cultivation method. There were no related rumors in the various myths on Earth, so it shouldn't be related to Earth. If he continued to cultivate step by step, he would be different from the warriors and aboriginals of Great Xia. The martial artists of Great Xia used the weapons and techniques that they had originally cultivated as their foundation. The divine weapon and the heaven and earth domain were either extensions or supplementary. On the other hand, the aboriginals only cultivated their flesh and blood to fight with their physical bodies. They condensed their divine soul and physical body into one, and did not cultivate their divine soul at all. On the other hand, this cultivation technique completely eliminated the aspect of physical combat, and it used the soul as the foundation to develop all changes. If one were to compare the sword sect to the master of Qi, the aboriginals would be the sword sect, while the warriors of Great Xia would be both the sword sect and the master of Qi. Rinpoche pondered for a moment and gained some insights. He wanted to test out the power of the invisible arrow, so he called Xianzhi over. Although the aboriginals didn't cultivate their divine soul and physical body were condensed into one, and they couldn't be easily shaken. Furthermore, Xianzhi was a cardinal heaven expert, which was one realm higher than him. He probably couldn't do anything to her. Your Highness. Xianzhi, who was dressed in armor, strode into the hall and cupped her hands. Why are you looking for me, Your Highness? I've practiced an offensive technique and want to test out its power, Rinpoche said bluntly. Xianzhi was stunned to hear this. Zhao Prince Consort had been diligently cultivating ever since he attained the Earth Embryo realm, but she didn't see him practicing any martial arts. Every day he would just lay down or concentrate. She had seen him a few times, but he didn't even notice it, as if he was in a daze. All right. Xianzhi immediately agreed. She secretly wondered if she should pretend if Zhao Prince Consort's attack wasn't powerful. This thought flashed through her mind, but she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. She felt that this idea was somewhat inexplicable. While Xianzhi was still thinking, Rinpoche didn't make any moves. However, she suddenly felt as if her brain had been pierced by something sharp. It was as if a hole had been poked in her brain. Her mind was drifting and she couldn't recover for a while. After a long while, her mind returned to her body. She felt a sharp pain in her brain, and she couldn't help but reveal a pained expression. Fortunately, this pain only lasted for a few breaths before gradually subsiding. However, it didn't subside and she still felt a headache. Xianzhi was shocked. The two of them were about 30 meters apart, and she had been hit before she felt anything. Although it didn't last long, if someone were to attack her now, it would be difficult for her to defend herself even if they were weaker than her. Seeing that Xianzhi's reaction wasn't small, Rinpoche was somewhat happy. It seemed like it was effective. He then asked Xianzhi how she felt and she told him the truth. Rinpoche pondered. If it had such an effect on a cardinal heaven expert, he didn't know what it would be like on a spirit wheel expert. However, spirit wheel experts had already cultivated their divine sense, so the effect wouldn't be as good as on the aboriginals. However, Rinpoche was able to cause such an attack even though he was one level lower than her, causing Xianzhi to be in pain for 7 to 8 breaths. If she was facing someone whose strength wasn't that much different, the effect would probably be better. Furthermore, if he had a crossbow or a close-quarters combat technique, it wouldn't be difficult to kill her opponent. More importantly, the arrow could be moved at will from 30 meters away, and it would be difficult for others to detect or evade it. It seemed like this invisible arrow wasn't only used to protect one's body before reaching the spirit wheel level. Even after reaching the spirit wheel level, as long as the power of this invisible arrow increased, it could also pose a great threat to people of the same level. While Rinpoche was pondering, Xinjia was also recalling what she felt just now. She felt that something was strange. Besides the pain, there seemed to be something else. After waiting for a while, she saw that Rinpoche was about to speak, so she said, "Your Highness, can you attack again? I want to try again. This is an attack on the spirit. I don't know if there are any side effects," Rinpoche said. The divine sense was the foundation of the human body. If it was damaged, it would be troublesome. The spirit and body of the aboriginals are condensed at will. Although there was some pain before, it was faintly discernible and didn't cause any damage. "Your Highness, you should be fine after a night's rest if you attack again." Xinjia was quite confident about this. Rinpoche nodded in agreement after hearing her say this. "In that case, get ready. Your Highness, please do it." Rinpoche's mind moved, and the second invisible arrow left his body and hit her in an instant. He saw that Xinjia's eyes were blank, and her face was a little flushed. Her body swayed and her legs twisted slightly. A moment later, her face turned into a painful expression. Seeing this scene, Rinpoche began to feel a little strange. Xinjia came back to her senses after a while and finally knew where the feeling that something was wrong came from. It was the feeling of her spirit leaving her body after being hit by the arrow. It was very similar to the feeling of being electrocuted. After thinking about it for a while, she then realized that she was still in the hall. When she looked up, she saw Rinpoche's slightly strange gaze, and she immediately felt very uncomfortable. She immediately cupped her hands and said, "If there's nothing else, Your Highness, I'll take my leave. If you want to find someone else to try it on, get someone to call me." "Okay." Rinpoche nodded. Seeing Xinjia leave the hall, he felt even more strange. This invisible arrow has such an effect? Or is it that Xinjia's constitution is different from ordinary people? It seems like I have to find someone else to try it on. Rinpoche was very interested in the techniques in the ancient scroll of methods, and his enthusiasm for cultivation was much higher than before. He wasn't like the Empress who forced him to practice fighting techniques in the past. It seemed like this path was very suitable for him. At present, there was still an invisible arrow in his sea of knowledge. This kind of invisible arrow would decrease every time it was used, and it would take a day to grind out another one. If all three were used, it would take 3 days to grind out all of them. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1157. Over the next few days, Rinpoche didn't find a suitable candidate to experiment on after grinding 2 more invisible arrows. Instead, his attention was attracted by another matter. "Your Highness, there has been progress in the study of vitality." Upon hearing this news, Rinpoche immediately wanted to go to Eternal Mountain. However, after some thought, he gave up on this idea. He asked the person in charge of the Eternal Mountain laboratory to come to the capital. 2 days later, Rinpoche met with 3 people. The person in charge was a white man named Lloyd Adam. He was a German and an expert in chemistry. The other 2 were white and Latino, and they were both experts in chemistry. These 3 people were also somewhat famous on Earth. They were kidnapped by Rinpoche to be in charge of the study of vitality. "Tell me the details," Rinpoche asked as he sat on the sofa. "Yes, let me introduce you first. In the previous experiment, we discovered vitality atoms with the element symbol YQ. Vitality atoms are everywhere, whether it's in the air, plants, soil, rocks, humans, or beasts. An individual vitality atom is very active and can combine with a variety of elements, the most important of which is the oxygen atom. After the vitality atom combines with the oxygen atom, it can become vitality particles that can be absorbed by us. Its composition is YQ2O, also known as binary oxygen. Although vitality atoms are active, they are very stable after combining with other elements and are difficult to separate. That was until the black crystal sent by Your Highness. That crystal is composed of ternary silicon sulfide with a structure of YQ3SiS. This structure is also very stable and difficult to separate even at high temperatures. The vitality atoms play a major role in this. Even if it is separated, the vitality atoms will quickly combine with other elements and react. This reaction can only be stopped under vacuum conditions. However, it can be converted into ternary aluminum sulfide using aluminum. We also discovered a substance with a composition of KUC, cyanide carbide, which reacts with ternary aluminum sulfide to produce relatively unstable ternary carbon. What do you mean by relatively unstable? What's the use of this ternary carbon? Ren Baqin leaned forward slightly and asked. Judging from the other party's words, the focus was on this ternary carbon. Ternary carbon is a kind of crystal, but when it comes into contact with air, its structure will slowly change into binary oxygen and carbon dioxide. If I had to describe this process, it would be like evaporation, Lloyd Adams said proudly. Ren Baqin did some calculations in his mind. According to the results of the research, two-dimensional oxygen was the so-called vital energy, and it was the main source of vital energy absorbed by the human body. When it entered the human body, the oxygen and vitality were absorbed by the human body. Ternary carbon could be converted to ternary oxygen. Wouldn't this artificially form an area with higher vitality than other places? Upon realizing this, Ren Baqin's heart beat a little faster. The structure of binary oxygen is very stable, right? Yes. What's the rate of evaporation? A crystal like this will take about 6 hours to completely evaporate. Lloyd Adam took out a small bottle. It contained a kind of liquid and a white crystal the size of a knuckle on his little finger. Is this the preservation of ternary carbon? How long can it be preserved? What kind of liquid is inside? Inside is unsaturated high-grade fatty acid vegetable oil. Ternary carbon can be stored in it for more than 3 years. That's enough. Ren Baqin stood up happily. Something as important as vital energy was actually separated and produced by chemical means in the laboratory. This simply made it difficult for him to calm down. If they could produce their own vital energy in the future and distribute it to everyone, such as Hong Wu and the other generals who were stationed in various places, the important ministers in the court and warriors with potential, the strength of the human race would be greatly improved after a period of consolidation. Only a small number of people could pass through the wall between the two worlds. Otherwise, they would definitely be besieged by the foreign races. Furthermore, the logistics wouldn't be able to support it. That mountain range could only support the Empress and the others. However, if they could produce vital energy, many people wouldn't need to pass through that area and could improve at the fastest speed. If there was enough ternary carbon, it could even make the vital energy in a space far surpass that of the foreign races outside the wall between the two worlds. The value of this was simply too great. What do you need to produce ternary carbon? Can we only use ternary silicon sulfide? Ren Baqin got up and walked around a few times before asking. Ternary silicon sulfide was the black, translucent crystal that Li Fu and the others had knocked out from the wall between the two worlds. At present, there were still foreign tribes that were too close to the territory of the foreign races. It would be best if they could use something else to replace it. Ternary silicon sulfide is currently the most suitable material to produce ternary carbon in large quantities. As for other materials, ternary carbon may also be produced, but from the looks of the materials we have studied so far, it is difficult to produce them in large quantities, Lloyd Adams said. Ren Baqin calculated in his mind. It seemed that he had to get the wall between the two worlds no matter what. Now that the Empress and the others were cultivating there, it was better not to disturb them. It was said that the wall between the two worlds was vast and boundless, at least 5,000 kilometers wide. There were only 2 foreign tribes, including the one by the sea, and there were only 3 foreign tribes. There was still a large area outside of their control. They should immediately arrange for people to go to the wall between the two worlds, set up a factory, and peel off the ternary silicon sulfide from above. However, the wall between the two worlds was extremely hard, and even Li Fu could only break a fist-sized piece at a time. If they wanted to peel off the ternary silicon sulfide, they still had to rely on these experts. Ren Baqin sat back on the sofa and praised, "Well done. What reward do you want?" Ren Baqin was in a very good mood. Given the contributions of these scientists, any reward wouldn't be too much. Money, reputation, and women. We also want to move here. Mount Empress is too desolate. Although there are brothels, we see those people every day, Lloyd Adams said bluntly. I agree. Ren Baqin laughed. It wasn't just these people. The sword masters also had the same idea. After staying in the desolate mountains for most of their lives, they had found a stable place to live. Of course, they had to find a prosperous and affluent place. Ren Baqin had previously promised those sword masters that he would take this opportunity to move some of them over and build another laboratory in the capital. It was better to keep some of the important research under his watch. After that, Rinpoche asked Lloyd Adam for a few more pieces of ternary carbon. Rinpoche simply asked for all of them and found a few places to experiment. The ternary carbon that Lloyd Adam took out at the beginning wasn't the largest, and of course, it wasn't the smallest either. The smallest was a crystal that was a little bigger than a grain of rice, which was the result of the initial experiment. The best was a white crystal that was the size of 2 fingers. Rinpoche experimented, took out a piece of ternary carbon that was the size of a knuckle and placed it on the cloth. As soon as he took it out, he could feel a trace of vitality slowly emitted from it. As he breathed, it was slowly absorbed into his body like a clear stream washing through his body. A small part of it slowly integrated into the blood in his body, while most of it completely dissipated. Rinpoche had only felt this kind of vitality when he broke through to the earth embryo realm. After that, he could only feel the movement of the earth's veins. It was probably because there was too little vitality in the air or because he wasn't strong enough. Presumably, this would change after he became a spirit wheel expert. Today, with this piece of ternary carbon, Rinpoche could feel the existence of vitality again and was immediately overjoyed. Although he couldn't see anything in the short term, Rinpoche dared to conclude that this item was invaluable. However, a small piece of ternary carbon could only release vitality bit by bit. If it was in a small enclosed space, it could slightly increase the vitality content in the air. However, it didn't have this effect in the main hall. Rinpoche could only absorb a very small part of it, and the rest dissipated with the air. Of course, it didn't disappear, but it was like a drop of water falling into the sea and didn't have any effect. Then Rinpoche took out the 2-fingered piece of ternary carbon and placed it in his palm. His entire body was immediately invigorated. Vitality that was 7 to 8 times thicker than before assaulted his senses. Rinpoche felt a burst of joy in his heart. After playing with the ternary carbon for a while, he saw that it had shrunk a little. Based on this speed, this piece of ternary carbon should be able to be used for 24 hours. Rinpoche put the crystal back into the bottle and sealed it. Previously, there weren't many black crystals that were sent back. After all, they were difficult to mine, and Li Fu didn't know what they were used for. He only picked up a few large pieces and sent them back. Nowadays, there weren't many left in the laboratory. If he wanted to obtain them in large quantities, even a year wouldn't be enough. The round-trip journey was too long, and the current flight route was only to Wuxia City. The straight-line distance from Wuxia City to the Wall of Two Worlds was at least 20,000 kilometers. However, this was in the middle of a mountain range. They had to cross mountains and ridges, and they had to avoid some dangerous places. It was more than 30,000 kilometers. Moreover, there were ferocious beasts everywhere, and some poisonous insects could cause great trouble. The winged cavalry warriors were only at the Kismet Heaven level and had to be careful there. They could only travel about 50 kilometers a day, and a round trip would probably take close to 2 years. It seems like we have to expand the Protectorate of the South further south. Now that the flight route to Wuxia City has been opened, the logistical pressure has been greatly reduced, and we should be able to recruit another 30,000 soldiers. After recruiting this time, we don't have to expand the area of control to either side. We just have to go all the way to the south as far as possible, and then clean up the ferocious beasts in the area and open up the flight route. Tomorrow we will have to discuss this matter with all the ministers in the imperial court. That old fellow Qin Xuan will definitely not object. Although Tuyu is dissatisfied with the ternary carbon as a weapon, no one can say anything. Not only will he not object, but he will also strongly support it. Rinpoche chuckled. Previously, the Qin nation had to use Dayo's paper money. Those people in the imperial court are still arguing, so we have to put in more effort. Rinpoche pondered again and felt that he should let Zhuyu, the Protectorate of the South, take action to let them know who was the master and who was the subordinate. Under the pressure of the large army, no matter what considerations they have to listen to him. Chapter 1158. The court assembly the next day was as Rinpoche had expected. Qin Xuan wasn't overjoyed about the recruitment of another 30,000 soldiers, but he was happy to see it happen. On the contrary, Tuan was extremely opposed to this. The previous economic plunder had just begun and hadn't seen any results yet. There was no surplus in the national treasury, and there were constant major movements in the country. Building roads, railways, laying cables and telephone lines, manufacturing airplanes, and laboratories required a lot of money. Not to mention universal education, which was also a huge expense. At this time, Rinpoche wanted to recruit soldiers from the 60,000 mountains and expand the territory of the Protectorate of the South. It was imaginable that it would cost a lot of money. Furthermore, these weren't temporary expenditures. They had to be invested over the years, and the current domestic taxes and other incomes simply couldn't support them. Tu Wan's pretty face was full of anger, and her aura was fluctuating. If she had a choice, she really wanted to beat up this prodigal in front of her. Zhao Prince Consort had brought about endless changes to Dayo. Today, Dayo was full of vitality, and the capital was changing with each passing day. However, his ability to spend money was also beyond everyone's imagination. Rinpochen already knew what Tu Wan was thinking and didn't say much. He just took out a few small bottles containing white crystals the size of a knuckle. "Take a look at this." Rinpochen laughed. "What's this? Can this thing fill the national treasury?" Tu Wan asked angrily. "This is the reason for the recruitment this time. You will know when you see this." Rinpochen ignored the angry Tu Wan, handed one bottle to Great Elder Shi Qin, and threw the other bottles to the other officials. "What's this? Is it oil? What's inside?" Tong Jingye opened the bottle and asked. "Take out the crystals inside and you will know." Rinpochen laughed. The officials took out the white crystals and looked at them carefully. After a while their expressions changed. "What's this?" Tong Jingye was shocked. When he put the item in his hand, he felt a wisp of aura coming from it, which was very beneficial to his cultivation. Seeing their expressions, the others wanted to take it over to take a look. However, the officials held it tightly in their hands and refused to let go. They didn't care about the oil on it and directly put it into their sleeves. This was good stuff. Whoever dared to snatch it would be beaten to death. From top to bottom they all behaved like bandits. When Rinpochen saw their expressions, he couldn't help but laugh in his heart. He said, "Everyone, you don't have to be like this. This item can only be used for a limited time. It will disappear in a few hours. But if I can achieve what I want, this thing can't be said to be inexhaustible, but it will be enough for all of you to use, and it can even be passed down to your descendants." Hearing this, those people's expressions changed a few times and they hurriedly asked, "Your Highness, what's going on? What was this? Where did you get it?" "Let the other officials see it first," Rinpochen said with a smile. Only then did everyone reluctantly take out the ternary carbon and hand it over to the others. The expression of the person who received it immediately changed. He understood why those people were unwilling to hand it over no matter what. A few pieces of ternary carbon were passed around in everyone's hands. Everyone knew how important this thing was. One by one they looked at Rinpochen and waited for him to explain the details. "This is what we call vital energy." Rinpochen laughed. The concept of vital energy was actually spread by him. Even the chemical symbol of vital energy was named by him. The place where we live is called the Land of Exile because there is a lack of vital energy here. Her Majesty and the others have already proven this. Outside the wall of the two worlds, the amount of vital energy in the air is more than 10 times more than what we have here. Vital energy is scarce here and cultivation is difficult. It can be said that it wasn't easy for all of you to reach your current level, and it is admirable. All of you are the pillars of the human race, and you have only reached this step after putting in so much effort. In a place with abundant vital energy, the cultivation speed is much faster than ours. Not only is it easier to break through, but the upper limit is also higher. Currently, only Her Majesty and a few others have reached longevity heaven and heaven opening hell. However, 2 of those experts from Great Xia have broken through after staying at the wall of the two worlds for 3 years. This is because the vital energy there is more abundant than here. We already know these things, but what is this? Could it be that Your Highness has discovered a vital energy mine? Tong Jingye asked loudly. Although it isn't far from it. Rinpochen smiled and continued, "What you see is ternary carbon, which needs to be wrapped in a kind of vegetable oil to be preserved for a long time. After taking it out, it will slowly dissipate and transform into vital energy. This ternary carbon isn't produced by heaven and earth, but artificially produced." Upon hearing this, everyone became spirited. Just like electricity? It's a little more troublesome, but the essence is the same. We use various means to borrow the power of heaven and earth, Rinpochen continued. Since this thing is artificially produced, there must be raw materials, and the raw materials are the layer of black crystals at the wall of the two worlds. However, the distance is long, transportation is difficult, and it is difficult to increase the strength of the human race. Therefore, we need to expand the Protectorate of the South, expand the area under our control, and extend it in the direction of the two worlds to shorten the distance. Then we will clear the air route and transport it by plane. This will greatly enhance the transportation capacity and reduce the transportation time. If we can extend the area under our control to the wall of the two worlds, planes can travel unimpeded along the way. In that case, we don't need to worry about the lack of this thing until these things are mined. The wall of the two worlds is 3 kilometers high and 10,000 kilometers long. I don't know if it will last for hundreds or thousands of years, so we naturally don't need to worry about this. As soon as Ren Baqin finished speaking, everyone understood. This matter is indeed important. Not only does it concern the prosperity of Dayo, but it also concerns the rise and fall of the human race. However, I have one thing to ask. Can the essence qi released by this 3 yuan or something be more than that? For example, can it be made bigger? Otherwise it's better than nothing for us. Is it easy to make? Zhui Yin, the Minister of Justice, stepped forward and asked. Of course it can. A piece of ternary carbon that's the size of 2 fingers can convert 10 times more vitality. Also, as you can see, these pieces can only be used for 6 hours, but a piece that's the size of 2 fingers can be used for 24 hours. A bigger one can release more vitality and can be used for a longer period of time. If it's the size of a human head, I'm afraid that the vitality in this hall won't be inferior to that outside the 60,000 mountains. As for making it, as long as you master the method, it won't be difficult and the cost won't be much. You can rest assured, Ren Baqin said with a smile. Zhui Yin originally guessed that it was possible, but this matter was too important, so he wanted to hear it from Ren Baqin himself. Now that he heard Ren Baqin speak, he was delighted. He wasn't the only one who felt this way. Everyone else was also delighted. According to Ren Baqin, this matter had to be started immediately without any delay. Not to mention the entire human race, even for themselves and their descendants, it had a value that no wealth in the world could compare to. This vitality couldn't be bought with money. If Ren Baqin knew what they were thinking, he would definitely think differently. When vitality became a commodity, it could be bought with money. Tu-Wan wouldn't object anymore. Instead, she excitedly discussed with everyone how to expand the scope of control of the Protectorate of the South. After a round of discussion, it was about suppressing the Qin nation and forcing them to use Dayo's paper money. After this was done, the Qin nation could be said to be at the mercy of Dayo. The Qin nation existed to transport resources and wealth to Dayo. Naturally, it was the same for Great Xia. In fact, it wasn't that Su Qing and the other ministers couldn't see the trick. Although the people of this world weren't knowledgeable enough, they weren't stupid. However, now that Great Xia had divided its territory, there would be a war between the two sides sooner or later. Not only did Su Qing want to borrow the power of Dayo, but he also didn't dare to offend Dayo at this time. To him, nothing was more important than defeating the imperial court of Great Xia. As a result, he readily agreed to this matter. Furthermore, before he agreed, Ren Baqin had already sent people to persuade many generals in the revolutionary army. Many of these people weren't of high birth and took advantage of the situation to rise. Now that they were a little more stable, they were greedy for wealth and women. As long as Ren Baqin sent people to let them see the benefits, they hit it off. 2 days later, the army in the Protectorate of the Southeast began to mobilize. Large amounts of soil and stones were packed into bags of food and transported directly from Lan City to the Protectorate of the Southeast via rail and ships. After the scouts from the Qin nation reported this, the upper echelons of the Qin nation panicked. On one hand, they mobilized troops and horses. On the other hand, they sent envoys to visit Ren Baqin. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1159. The Qin nation was located in a corner. There were many rivers in the country which served as a natural barrier. Although the Protectorate of the Southeast shared a border with the Qin nation had rarely been affected by Dayo for many years. In addition, it was difficult for the Yun nation's emperor's decree to enter each city. Each city lord was independent, which was worse than the Qin nation. Therefore, the Qin nation could be said to have no foreign enemies. For the past 200 years, it had been a period of peace and prosperity. There were many beautiful women in the country, delicious food, intoxicating wine, luxurious enjoyment, and comfortable enjoyment. It was the same from top to bottom. The Temple of Heaven had originally ranked the top 100 experts in the world, but only 2 of them were from the Qin kingdom, and their rankings were not high. After Dayo annexed the Yun nation, although the monarch of the Qin nation wanted to make progress, it was already difficult to reverse the accumulated abuses in the country. In addition, the monarch of the Qin nation wasn't a wise monarch, so he had no choice but to send envoys to Dayo to deliver tributes, hoping that they wouldn't offend the Empress. Figuratively speaking, it was the thought of a small country seeking perfection. A few months ago, Dayo sent someone to pay a visit to many of the Qin nation's ministers and explain Dayo's request to them. Some of them were convinced. After all, the Qin nation loved exquisite items and luxurious clothes. Dayo's glass, mirrors, clocks and spices as well as the Yun nation's silk, jade and gemstones were all what they wanted. However, many people objected to the idea of using Great Xia's banknotes. From their point of view, paper money could be had as much as one wanted, and gold and silver were the real deal. Moreover, there were also a few people who felt that something was wrong, but they didn't know what exactly was wrong. Thus, the imperial court argued for a few months. However, when the Protectorate of the South made its move, the entire state of Qin immediately felt that a calamity was upon them. Although there were many rivers and waterways in the Qin nation and Dayo wasn't good at water battles, the Yun nation wasn't bad. It was just that the cities in the Yun nation were originally not only loosely connected, but there were also many grudges between them. As a result, the Qin nation had been peaceful for more than 200 years. If the Yun nation's navy joined forces with Dayo's experts, the result would be obvious. Dayo would probably follow in the footsteps of the Yun nation in a year and a half. The court, which was originally quarreling endlessly, immediately became unified. They repeatedly visited the envoy sent by Dayo and allowed the envoy who had stayed in the capital for several years to seek an audience with Rinpoche. Rinpoche waited for the Qin envoys to leave before bursting into laughter. The entire Qin nation was really unbearable. It was said that the envoy from the Qin kingdom consumed rune stone powder, which was similar to marijuana. Many people in the Qin nation loved this item, especially among the aristocratic families. This item was extremely common. It was clear how rotten the Qin state was. It was no wonder that the Empress didn't like them and would kill every envoy that came. Rinpoche subconsciously wondered if he should give them some white powder. However, after thinking about it for a while, he discarded this thought. It wasn't that this thing couldn't be made, it could be made in Dayo. Moreover, he could amass a lot of wealth in a short period of time. However, it was inevitable that this thing would spread to other places, and in the end it would lead to endless disasters. On the contrary, it would be better to rear some scorpions. The Aboriginals loved scorpion tubes. Although the effects were similar, they were not addictive. Some of the poison was not harmful to the Aboriginals. Moreover, scorpions could be used as both poison and food. This thing was much easier to control than the white powder. After sending off the Qin state's envoy, a few days later, the envoy returned with news that the Qin state had agreed to the original request. Immediately, Rinpoche asked someone to use paper money to exchange for a sum of gold and silver from the Qin state. However, this fluctuation in price was like a knife to the Qin state. Then he asked the caravan to transfer some goods to the Qin state. As previously mentioned, they used paper money to trade. The people of the Qin state had less paper money but more goods. This made them feel a lot more relieved. Although they paid a slightly high price, they finally got something back. Although some people still felt that there was a problem, they couldn't figure out what the problem was. It seemed that gold and silver were exchanged for paper money, which were then exchanged for goods. Although they had to pay a price, the goods were still sold at a profit. There was nothing wrong with this. At this time, Rinpoche made another move. He required the Qin state to hold a certain amount of paper money. This made the people of the Qin state dissatisfied, but they didn't dare to disagree. Fortunately, these paper money could always be exchanged for goods. Just like this, Rinpoche gently pushed 2 moves and obtained a large amount of money and profits from the Qin state. That's right, Rinpoche required the Qin state to hold a certain amount of paper money. In other words, it was equivalent to not having to return the money. There were 2 scholars in the Qin state who spent some time to figure out the knack of this. In the end, they could only sigh and didn't say anything to anyone. To Dayo, the Qin state was like meat on a chopping board. It was useless to think too much. A few days later, the 2 scholars shut themselves in their rooms. The affairs of the state were like this, making people feel sad but helpless. They could only push everything aside and forget about the mountains and rivers. Rinpoche naturally didn't care about those. After plundering a large amount of wealth from the Qin state and Great Xia to replenish the national treasury, Rinpoche devoted himself to cultivation in addition to handling some daily affairs. At this moment he was extremely envious of the Empress. She didn't have to worry about anything and could be wholeheartedly focused on peace and quiet. This region was really inhumane. He didn't know what the nobles in the past were fighting for instead of living a good life. Were they looking for trouble? Rinpoche sat in the main hall. With a flick of his finger, a ball of flame appeared on his fingertip. It danced continuously on his fingertip. In fact, it was more accurate to call it a flame. It was similar to the flame ignited by a lighter. This flame is born from my soul and is one with me. It won't burn me. Rinpoche felt the heat coming from the flame. He placed a piece of paper on the flame and it was instantly ignited. It was no different from a real flame. With a thought from Rinpoche, the flame was extinguished out of thin air. Condensing a trace of flame is just one step. I have to at least condense a fireball. Rinpoche muttered to himself. He still hadn't forgotten his great wish of the 5 fireball sect. This method of condensing the 5 elements had an advantage compared to the invisible arrow. It didn't have to be stored in the sea of knowledge like the invisible arrow. Every time it was used there would be one less, and it needed to be tempered from the soul again. This was because the invisible arrow was formed from his soul. This method of condensing the 5 elements was different. It was observed by the soul and condensed by the heart. When it turned illusory into reality, it was formed by condensing the vital energy in the air and could be used at will. However, doing so would tire the soul. If it was tired to a certain extent, it would be like a sorcerer who had run out of energy and could only swing a stick to hit people. On the contrary, the invisible arrow existed in the sea of knowledge and had no effect on him. Even if he was extremely tired and couldn't condense a small flame, he could use it as long as there was an invisible arrow in the sea of knowledge. Speaking of which, condensing the illusory into reality requires vital energy. If it's in a place with sufficient vital energy, the condensing effect should be better. Rinpoche took out the largest piece of essence crystal. Essence crystal was a random name that was easy to use and much easier to understand than ternary carbon. After waiting for a moment, Rinpoche visualized it with his mind. A flame rose from his fingertips again. This flame was at least twice as big as the previous one. After proving his conjecture, Rinpoche put away the essence crystal and entered the universe in his sea of knowledge. As he entered the earth embryo, a lot of earth energy entered the sea of knowledge, and the universe changed slightly. Although the changes weren't big, Rinpoche could feel that the universe was a little more condensed and more agile. However, no living creature could appear. He didn't know if it would be possible in the future. Rinpoche didn't know that there was really a living creature in his sea of knowledge. For the past few years he had been lost in his sea of knowledge. However, the scope of the universe in his sea of knowledge was too large, so he hadn't noticed it yet. A few months later, a fist-sized scarlet fireball appeared in Rinpoche's hand. The flame spun ceaselessly in the shape of a ball and rose again. The problem that Rinpoche faced now was how to throw the fireball. He had just tried to use it like the invisible arrow, but it didn't work. This made him feel that there must be some trick that he hadn't mastered. After spending a long time trying various methods, Rinpoche simply threw the fireball as if he was throwing a ball. The fireball flew out of his hand and directly hit the door in the distance. The fireball suddenly exploded and blasted a hole in the door. Rinpoche had a strange look on his face. Is this how the fireball is used? No matter how I think about it, it's impossible. If that's the case, my arms will be sore after throwing hundreds of fireballs with all my strength. I've never seen anyone throw fireballs until their arms are sore. Does one have to have a good body to become a sorcerer? There must be something that I haven't figured out yet. For the next few months, Rinpoche practiced and experimented at the same time, but he still couldn't find the reason. In the end, he practiced all kinds of throwing techniques such as the straight ball, the curved ball, the falling leaf ball, and the full moon scimitar. It's enough for me to play professional baseball now. Rinpoche mocked himself, twisted his body, and said, "Watch my big fireball technique." The fireball flew out of his hand and floated in the air as if it could float away with the wind. However, it landed right in the center of the wooden target that was 50 meters away and blasted it into a pitch-black color. This wooden board was made of an extremely hard wood that could withstand the fireball's attack. However, all of this was useless. The most important thing was that Rinpoche still had to throw the fireball. Rinpoche felt that if he continued to practice he would end up throwing iron balls, wooden balls, clay balls and water balls. That's F***king nonsense. Rinpoche said faintly. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1160. Another year had passed and he had successfully thrown fireballs, earth balls, iron balls and water balls. He was only short of a wooden ball. However, it was to no avail. He still relied on his hands to throw. Now that he had developed a good throwing technique, few people below the cardinal heaven level couldn't miss. However, it was still useless. Today is Friday and it should be about time. Renming's land could allow humans to build a forward base there. There's one more thing. Ji Jingyanhui, someone wants to see you. Coming? Chao Wenji walked out of a small room, his bulging muscles covered in sweat. Chao Wenji was the stubborn young man who was accepted into the martial arts center by Ren Baqian. He always had a dream, and the scene in his dream was very similar to the war that the human race was forced into the barren land by another world. As a result, Ren Baqian had some guesses about his origin and had been paying close attention to him all these years. If there were no accidents, he would be brought back to Dayo in a few years. However, he was still too weak at the intermediate level of the Earth Wheel level. Although he was already very strong on Earth, he was only equivalent to the winged cavalry in Dayo and couldn't pass through the barrier between the two worlds. The people there were all elites and no one would take care of him. Instead, he would be a burden to others. Furthermore, training required time. Even if he was brought back to Dayo, it would take a long time before he could be of use. One advantage of Earth was that the timeline was different, but the vitality there was scarce. Fortunately, vitality was important before the Earth embryo realm, but it wasn't decisive. It mainly depended on food and blood to transform. The existence of the Horn Dragon Galaxy happened to make up for this. The timeline there was also different. Layman and Ji asked hesitantly. Since it was impossible to reach the Earth embryo realm on Earth, how could his wife be so strong? It's equivalent to opening up the sky and Earth. Although Renji was slightly impulsive and extremely stubborn, he was very determined to practice martial arts. He then encouraged them again and said, "That's a good place to go, and the disciples of my martial arts center will naturally go there in the future. Both of you are the best among the disciples in terms of talent and temperament, which is why I chose you this time." "We will do our best," they immediately said. Ren Baqian nodded slightly and took out 2 booklets from his bag. "I don't know how long you'll be gone this time. This is about the Earth embryo realm and the Heaven Gate." "Thank you, Master. Your duty this time is to be on guard. You need to be careful if anything happens and focus on your own safety. Remember, strength is everything." "Understood." Push a Book of God Beyond the Universe, a new book by a 10,000 subscribed big shot. New by Chinese website. Mew. Chapter 1161. After an unknown period of time, Chao Wenji woke up from the long darkness. There were many sounds coming from the outside world. It was the sound of the sleeping cabin door opening. Chao Wenji got down from the reclining chair. His legs were weak and he couldn't exert any strength. However, with the strong physical fitness of an earth wheel expert, it didn't affect his walking. This was an inevitable reaction after a long period of hibernation. He only needed 2 to 3 days to recover. This was known from the handbook that was distributed previously. Are we almost there? Chao Wenji had this thought, and an impatient emotion arose in his heart. The first space voyage wasn't pleasant. After experiencing the excitement of leaving Earth, everyone quickly fell into boredom. Every day, everyone saw the dark starry sky and the distant stars, which seemed to remain the same throughout the years. After 3 days, except for a small number of people, most of them entered hibernation and relied on the computerized intravenous infusion of nutrients to maintain their vital signs. The feeling of having their lives in the hands of others was equally terrible. Fortunately, such days were finally over. He took a step forward, and the door of the sleeping cabin opened automatically. There were very few footsteps in the surroundings. "Those who have woken up, please proceed to the hall. Those who have woken up, please proceed to the hall." The voice of the staff on the airship kept coming out. It was better to change that broken voice to a softer, electronically synthesized voice. When he came out of the cabin door, he saw Xiang Yang walking out not far away. "How do you feel?" A gentle and steady voice sounded from the side. It was Jing Yanhui, who had woken up earlier than Ren Baqian. "Not bad." Chao Wenji shifted his gaze away from Xiang Yang and looked around. Besides Jing Yanhui, there were a few other people who had come out. They were all high-level earth wheel experts from the military. The stronger one was, the faster he would wake up. Those foreigners who relied on mechanical skeletons still needed some time to wake up. Furthermore, it would take a longer time for them to move freely. There were only a few people in the hall. "Good morning, gentlemen. Would you like a cup of warm water?" a lady asked after examining Chao Wenji's body. He was a robot. He looked no different from a human, and his movements weren't stiff at all. Chao Wenji knew that he needed a cup of water to restore some of his gastrointestinal function. He sat on the sofa and sipped the warm water. He could see the outside world through the projection on the surrounding walls. The boundless universe, an unfamiliar starry sky, and 2 blue-green planets in the distance. Not long after, the hall became lively. Among them, the earth wheel experts from China were naturally in the best condition, followed by those from the Japanese. Their familiarity with and knowledge of China's culture gave them an advantage in learning many martial arts techniques compared to people from other countries. As for the people from other countries, apart from a few Chinese and a few Caucasians, most of them were lucky to be able to walk. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone had just woken up from hibernation, and they must have felt as if they had been given a new lease on life. Everyone can look at the projection on the wall. We have already arrived at the Horned Dragon Galaxy. Rejoice, gentlemen and ladies. We have taken the most important step for humanity. The era of space exploration will be opened by us. The one giving the speech was the vice captain, who was said to be in charge of political work in the army. Chao Wenji wasn't very interested in what he was talking about. He looked at the 2 planets on the projection with some anticipation. Although he was looking forward to improving his strength, he was only at the intermediate stage of the Earth wheel. He didn't have the same urgency as Jing Yanhui, who was always stuck at a bottleneck. He was also very interested in extraterrestrial planets. There was still half a month before they arrived at the 4-leaf grass planet. He didn't know who came up with the name. It was probably because the continents on the planet looked a little like 4-leaf clovers. During this half a month, everyone had to adjust their physical condition to the best to deal with the various dangers that might appear on the extraterrestrial planet. From the previous information, everyone already knew that the danger of ordinary life on this planet was only slightly greater than that of life on Earth. However, some individuals were extremely dangerous. Fortunately, they were landing on a continent without extraterrestrial civilization. At the very least, they didn't have to face the aliens at the beginning. They only had to face the dangers brought by wild beasts. 3 days later, Chao Wenji received the latest information on the extraterrestrial planet from the exploration spacecraft that had stopped here previously. Looking at the ravines on the ground caused by the battle between the 2 huge beasts and the completely destroyed forest, everyone had a further understanding of the power and danger of the opposite sex. 13 days later. In a palace on the 4-leaf grass planet, a 2-horned thunder barbarian who was more than 5 meters tall, appeared hundreds of meters in the air in a flash and looked into the distance with a deep gaze. After a few breaths, a female thunder barbarian stood beside him and asked, "King, what happened? It seems that something is coming." The tall thunder barbarian said in a deep voice. "What?" The female thunder barbarian was puzzled. The tall thunder barbarian sensed carefully. After a while, he returned to the palace with some doubts and ordered, "Someone go to the east to investigate. I feel that something is going in that direction." At the same time, some people also sensed something. However, they didn't know what happened. No one would have thought that an extraterrestrial visitor would come to this world just now. After a series of roars and violent tremors, the 2 spaceships landed on a huge plain more than 10 kilometers away from each other, scaring away countless birds and beasts. After the spaceship landed, a few small detection instruments protruded from one side to detect the environment of this planet. Then, 4 unmanned reconnaissance drones ejected from the spaceship to investigate the surrounding situation. As the information was gathered, Chao Wenji also received new information. The gravity was slightly higher than on Earth, and the oxygen content in the air was slightly higher. Apart from that, a few gases that did not exist on Earth were detected in the air, but they did not have much effect on the human body. In other words, humans could come into contact with the air of this world without any protection. The day of this world was 24 hours and the night was 16 hours. When everyone arrived on this planet, it could only be considered noon. After 3 hours, the side door of the spaceship opened, and 2 exploration team members walked out of the enclosed cabin. After the 2 exploration team members entered the enclosed cabin, the connection between the enclosed cabin and the spaceship was closed. It was the first time that humans had set foot on an alien planet with life, so they could not be too cautious. 10 minutes later, the 2 of them returned. After an hour, another 5 people came out of the spaceship. Chao Wenji was one of them. From head to toe, the camouflage leather protective suit was actually made of synthetic materials. When attacked, it could reduce the cushioning effect. It also had excellent protection against sharp blades, and it also had a certain degree of resistance against hot and cold temperatures. The only drawback was that it was not very good for ventilation. This is the 4-leaf grass planet. When Chao Wenji came out of the cabin, he could smell the fresh air. The fragrance of flowers, grass, and other smells were mixed in. It was far more comfortable than the air on Earth. He moved his hands and feet. The gravity was the same as what he knew before. It was slightly higher than Earth, about 1-2 times. It was not a burden to him. He turned his head and looked around. At the end of his vision was an endless plain. Large yellow flowers swayed in the wind. Countless yellow petals rose with the wind. Unknown bugs wandered in the air. Chao Wenji avoided a few bugs. No one knew if these bugs from the alien planet were harmful to humans. Perhaps ordinary substances to them could be a fatal threat to humans. All of this was recorded in the handbook and everyone had memorized it from beginning to end. He turned his head and looked around. Like him, the others were observing the surroundings and familiarizing themselves with the environment. However, at this moment, Chao Wenji's eyes narrowed. He felt something moving underground. He didn't feel any danger. That thing wasn't coming for him. Be careful, there's something underground. Chao Wenji shouted. Following his words, a white man not far away suddenly let out a scream. A creature that looked like a hairtail or an eel suddenly rushed out of the soil, bit off one of his legs, swung its tail, and drilled into the soil again. The soil below was like water to it. Chao Wenji's expression changed, and a knife appeared in his hand. There's more underground. Go back, a man not far away shouted. This man was an expert from the military and had the strength of an advanced earthwheel expert. One of the soldiers wanted to drag the screaming white man back, but someone immediately shouted, "Don't come near." Following this voice, fish-like monsters jumped out of the ground, took a piece of flesh from the man's body and disappeared. There were at least dozens of these monsters. In the blink of an eye, the man was dead. Chao Wenji seized the opportunity to attack. He cut off a few monsters and carefully avoided the bright red blood that sprayed out. Then he slowly returned to the slanted platform under the cabin. The creatures on this planet were more unfriendly than expected. P.S. I'm recommending a friend's book, Heaven's Spoiler Group, which was just published today. The first subscription has already exceeded 10,000, so you can read it without worry. Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, booksellers. Chapter 1162. Over the next few months, humans slowly gained a foothold on this strange planet. Gaining a foothold referred to the establishment of a small outpost. The strange fish that Rinpoche saw the other day weren't considered powerful, and there weren't many of them either. However, they were very fast and had very sharp teeth. There were many small holes in the bushes in the areas where they were frequently seen. These holes were covered with mucus and were easy to spot and identify. As long as one paid attention to this, they would be able to avoid them. In fact, they rarely left the area where they were often active. Furthermore, with the use of vibration conductors, they could directly collapse their nest and the holes in the ground. Even if they could move in the mud, their speed would be greatly reduced. Previously, the spacecraft just happened to land on top of their nest, which led to the subsequent events. Fortunately, with the assistance of numerous technological equipment, humans finally built a small outpost in this area. It was a small village with dozens of model houses. The ground was paved with steel, and the surrounding area was surrounded by 3-meter-tall solid walls. It looked like concrete, but in fact it was a type of expansion material. It was only the size of a Coke bottle, and after it was released and shaped, it was at least half a meter square. Its hardness wasn't lower than that of concrete, and it had better toughness and shock resistance. The only drawback of this new material was probably the cost. However, for this expedition team, this wasn't too big of a problem. A year after they gained a foothold, they left behind 4 small exploration spacecraft that could only accommodate 3 people. 2 spacecraft carried information about this planet, as well as some collected flora, fauna, and mineral specimens, and began their return journey. It was conceivable that there would be more people arriving the next time. Although humans were eager to communicate with intelligent life outside of Earth, the governments of various countries weren't in a hurry to do so. No one knew how they would react to another civilization, especially when that civilization was encroaching on their living space. The top priority was to send more people over and gain a deeper understanding of this planet. They wanted to find materials and technologies on this planet that could break the bottleneck of human technology, truly gain a foothold on this planet, and develop the ability to protect themselves. Are you saying that the red moon in the sky is fake? Rinpoche narrowed his eyes when he heard what Claude said. Yes, and that crimson moon has a very strange power. Claude did not keep him in suspense at all. He quickly explained the situation. That crimson moon has a power that can make people ignore its differences. It directly affects people's hearts and brains. It's very strange. If I didn't have the habit of recording at all times, I'm afraid I would still be in the dark. Your Majesty, do you still remember the crimson moon from half a month ago? I saw that there seemed to be something in the crimson moon. I remembered it and wanted to observe it more. However, after an hour I forgot about it. The next day I found what I had written in my notes and almost thought it was an illusion. But I was not the only one who wrote it down, and so I knew that my thoughts had been changed by the red moon, and that it was a terrible power. Rinpoche was a little absent-minded. He vaguely remembered that this had happened to him more than once. However, he had never thought about it. Only when he heard Claude's words did he realize that he seemed to have overlooked something. Rinpoche's face immediately turned ugly. What's in the middle of the crimson moon? I don't know. It disappeared before we could observe it. We have been observing the red moon in the sky these days. It's very strange. It waxes and wanes just like the real thing. There are also craters and light reflections. It's hard for us to distinguish them. Then how do you know that the crimson moon is fake? It was deduced by Arvid. As early as a few years ago, we knew that one of the two satellites around this planet was fake. We had been observing and calculating, and Arvid calculated the two satellites separately. In the end, he found that some of the data on the red moon didn't match. The final result was that the red moon didn't have any effect on the planet under our feet. Rinpoche nodded slightly. Arvid was a very famous mathematician in the laboratory. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Rinpoche asked again. That's all. We'll keep a close eye on that red moon. If that thing appears again, we'll know what it is. However, this will probably take a few years and we don't know when that thing will appear again. Okay, continue to observe and inform me if there is any news. Rinpoche nodded. Can I make a small request? Claude rubbed his hands and said with some embarrassment. Say it. I will think about it, Rinpoche said. Since he wanted the horse to run, he had to give it grass to eat. Claude's progress wasn't fast, but it couldn't be helped. What he learned today was already a huge gain. Can we live in this city? This is the only modern city in this world. I have a familiar feeling here. I like it here. Our monitoring at the seaside has ended. In the future, we just need to collect data there regularly. Sure. Rinpoche didn't expect it to be such a simple request. Thank you very much, Your Highness. Claude was quite happy that he had achieved his wish. After Claude left, Rinpoche's face turned solemn. The crimson moon could actually affect people's thoughts. It was simply terrifying. The scariest thing was that if no one exposed it, you wouldn't know what happened at all. In such a situation, every intelligent being would feel fear. You didn't know if it only affected your perception of the crimson moon. After thinking carefully for a moment, he had a headache. He couldn't figure out what he had seen at that time. He only remembered that he seemed to have seen something and then forgot about it. This made Rinpoche's face even worse. After sitting there thinking for a long time, Rinpoche came to the hall where the supercomputer was placed. Master, do you remember me? Do you need any more special services? Lolita said with an extremely innocent look and voice. If you want to ask for any special services, then you have fallen into her trap. Anyway, you can't touch her. She is absolutely unscrupulous, and the person who created her was a psychopath. Remember one thing. The crimson moon in this world is fake. It can affect people's thinking and make them forget about its abnormalities, Rinpoche said with a serious face. He felt that artificial intelligence should not be affected by the crimson moon. He told Lolita so that she could remind him from time to time. The uniqueness of the crimson moon made him feel that it must be very important. Otherwise it wouldn't have hidden itself. In addition, since the existence of the 10,000 races, did no one else notice and record about the crimson moon? Would anyone know anything? Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, booksellers. Chapter 1163. The 237 regions of the Lansang territory were divided into 36 heavenly regions. Each powerful race controlled a region, and they governed many medium and weak races. This was called a heavenly region. However, not every powerful race had a divine master. Most of them had fallen in the war thousands of years ago. Therefore, the 7 heavenly regions were the most powerful, occupying nearly half of the 237 heavenly regions. 6 God Celestial Territory Citadel. You are Gu Bo from the Acceptance Spirit Tribe? In a room, a herdsman raised his head and looked at the door. A blue-winged young lady of the Blue Wings tribe walked in. She was about 1 meter tall and had blue wings. The man did not look like a herder, so he did not feel surprised at all. He just replied coldly, I'm not a herder. He replied coldly, yes, I am Gu Bo. I have something important to report to the Divine Master. It is about the humans who were driven out 5,000 years ago. The Divine Master is in seclusion. I do not know when he will come out. Wait here first. When he goes out, someone will tell you where you cannot go, the young lady from the Blue Wings tribe said in a voice as beautiful as a bird's song. This is very important. Gu Bo insisted in a cold voice. This was the first time he had left the 60,000 mountains, the first time he had come to Six God Celestial territory, and the first time he had come to Citadel. Other than that, he had no interest in this place. There were no jade-wasted slaves here, and there were no beautiful forests. This magnificent city was more like a cage to him. The humans were driven out of the banished land 5,000 years ago. Given the short lifespan of humans, they have already experienced hundreds of generations. Even if they have changed, they will not be a threat to us in a short period of time, the young lady from the Blue Wings tribe said in a cheerful and pleasant voice. This was not arrogance but self-confidence, which race here had not developed for thousands of years. Even if the humans came out, what could they do in a few years, a few decades, or even a few centuries? They might not even be able to produce a human sovereign. The young lady thought for a moment and said, "The stainless city is near the banished land, right? I will send someone to inform them. According to the agreement, if the humans return, they will be exterminated together. If the Divine Master Stainless is willing to act, the humans will definitely be exterminated." In her mind, the Divine Master Stainless would not act. She could just send some people to exterminate the humans. Gu Bo placed a hand on his chest and bowed. "Since it has come to this, I will return to the ancestral land to take a look." Gu Bo was similarly unfamiliar with the Lansang territory. It took him a lot of time to come here after asking around. Since it was done, he couldn't wait to go to the ancestors' land. "Then if you leave a little later, there will be a reward for you." The young lady of the Blue Wing clan flapped her wings and flew in the sky. She looked cheerful all the time. Seeing her, people of the Blue Wing clan felt that they should be like her, never sad and always happy. The Empress sat in a cave and was combing her hair in front of a silver mirror. The person in the mirror never changed. Even if another 100 years passed, it would still be the same. Even though it was located in a simple and crude location, the Empress had plenty of equipment. At that time, Rinpoche even prepared a tent and sleeping bag for her, but he didn't use them. As for the wine, no matter how much he tried to save it, he had already finished it. "Your Majesty." Jupu Hua stood in front of the cave and raised her voice. The Empress couldn't be seen from this position. After entering the cave, they still had to turn a corner to reach the place where the Empress cultivated. After a short while, the Empress walked out of the cave with a white background and red clothes. "What's the matter?" "There's a caravan." Jupu Hua's eyes were full of desire. "No." The Empress flatly refused. "Anyway, they already know what they need to know," Jupu Hua muttered. "The herdsman had left more than 2 years ago, so he must have spread the news a long time ago. But they don't know where we are," the Empress said coldly. "Tell them to behave themselves." Thinking about how these people in the martial arts hall had been suppressed for a long time and had been cultivating in the mountains every day, they had probably reached their limits. It was time to let them relax a little. "How many people have reached longevity heaven?" 3. Jupu Hua replied. 3. Among these aboriginals there were only 3. There were more spirit wheel experts who had broken through to heaven and earth than them. Excluding the previous 2, there were 5. However, these people had been stuck at the pass for many years. Now that they had changed places, they broke through in one go. The others weren't so fast. In fact, there were nearly 20 people who hadn't even condensed a heaven-grade weapon. The Empress said coldly, "I will send some spices and wine to the Wall of 2 Realms. When the caravan leaves, I will exterminate the 2 races at the Wall of 2 Realms. Until then, all of you stay here obediently." "Understood." Jupu Hua smiled wantonly. It had been a long time since she experienced blood and killing. Even if she died in battle, it would be more interesting than cultivating on this mountain peak. Not long after Jupu Hua left, the Empress felt a slight tremor under her feet, as if someone was hitting the mountain. Presumably, it was those bloodthirsty and ruthless fellows venting their energy. She glanced at the boundless plains in the distance. A large number of farmlands outside the mountains were cultivated by the Grey Thorns, but they basically didn't dare to enter the mountains. The Empress and the others had been here for nearly 2 years, but they didn't realize that there was such a group of fierce people nearby. In fact, these weak tribes posed little threat to the humans. The strongest among them were generally at the cardinal heaven level, so it was very easy to destroy them and even enslave them. The real enemies of the human race were the more than 200 strong races and the 36 strong races that were above them. The Empress's eyes were like the surging sea with countless lightning bolts. "Is he going to break through again?" the Empress thought to herself. Her hard work these days hadn't been in vain. She smirked and returned to the cave to take out her communication device to watch a movie. Unfortunately, there's no dessert or wine. The Empress felt deeply regretful as she ate some fruit. Cultivation was indeed hard, unlike in the palace. Oh? Is this the first batch of products? The shapes are too irregular and the sizes are different. Ren Baqin expressed his dissatisfaction as he looked at the crystals in front of him. For the first batch, there are still some procedures that haven't been completed, especially during the final condensation. In addition, Your Highness, there are no standards yet. If we want to formulate uniform rules, we need to first formulate standards. Lloyd Adams said respectfully. How big are the crystals that you produce? Ren Baqin asked. We can produce all the crystals that you see now, and they can also be used as standard sizes. Set the crystals into 5 grades. The lowest grade is grade 5, which is 4 centimeters long, 1 centimeter wide, and 1 centimeter thick. The 4th grade is 6 centimeters long, 1.5 centimeters wide, and 1.5 centimeters thick. The 3rd grade is 9 centimeters long, the 4th grade is 13.5 centimeters long, and the 5th grade is 20.75 centimeters long. The thickness of the crystal should be proportionally increased, Ren Baqin said after combining the feeling of using the crystals previously. A piece of grade 4 crystal was equivalent to 37 pieces of grade 5 crystal, and a piece of grade 3 crystal was equivalent to 37 pieces of grade 4 crystal, and so on. Grade 5 crystals could be used for 24 hours and could increase the vitality of an enclosed room by 50%. This type of crystal could be used as a circulating commodity. Some officials would want to buy some to nurture the younger generation in their families, especially for a genius like Tong Lan. Any family would go all out to mobilize resources to speed up her growth. One had to know that the human race still had a great enemy. If the enemy wasn't eliminated, no amount of wealth would be meaningful. Even a Cardinal Heaven expert would be able to produce a considerable effect if he used it. As for grade 3, some top experts could use it to break through barriers such as Li Yuanzhu and Hong Wu. In addition, Longevity Heaven could also be used. Grade 5 is the most, followed by grade 4 and grade 3, which will be reduced proportionally. You can think about how to distribute the amount. As for grade 2 and grade 1, they aren't needed for the time being, Ren Baqin said. Understood. How many crystals can this batch produce? Ren Baqin asked. A total of 3 tons of ternary silicon sulfide was sent back this batch. According to the calculation of grade 5 crystals, 30,000 pieces can be produced. Ren Baqin calculated that 500 grams could produce 5 pieces of grade 5 crystals. 5 pieces of grade 5 crystals weighed no more than 2 kilograms. That was a ratio of 1:3. Produce 10,000 pieces of grade 5 crystals and the rest will be used to produce grade 4 and 3 crystals, Ren Baqin said. In this way, 10,000 pieces of grade 5 crystals, close to 3,000 pieces of grade 4 crystals, and more than 800 pieces of grade 3 crystals could be produced. It seemed like a lot, but one piece could only be used for a day to a week. It probably wouldn't take long for them to be used freely. The next batch would only be sent back after at least a year. We have to increase the investment in the wall between the two worlds. Chapter 1164. Break through the wall between the two worlds? Are you confident now? That's a good thing. Ren Baqin heard the Empress's voice coming from the radio station. Although there hadn't been any conflict with the 2 foreign tribes at the border yet, the supply of the Empress and the others had been cut off, and they were completely self-sufficient. If they could break through the wall, the supplies of the Empress and the others could be transported by the winged cavalry. Furthermore, some of the troops could be stationed outside the wall and make use of the abundant vitality from the outside world to train. Of course, there was also a lot of danger, especially since they didn't know the plans of the foreign tribes. Destroying the 2 foreign tribes could easily alarm them. It was difficult to even investigate the situation because they were of different races. Wildflowers? Where did they come from? I'm too busy with work every day. Ren Baqin's expression suddenly changed. Addicted to brothels? Who said that? I won't beat him to death. What silencing? What a joke. Come back and take a look if you don't believe me. Well, that's right. I'm now an expert at the Earth Embryo realm and am only 1 step away from becoming a spirit wheel expert. No matter how big this step is, it's just 1 step. Erhua? I don't think Erhua's condition has much to do with me, right? I think she probably lacks motherly love. We're just doing some research. Why are you so anxious? Can you still come back and bite me? Ren Baqin laughed heartily. After hanging up, Ren Baqin looked uncertain. The Empress wouldn't impulsively come back, would she? Well, probably not. She wasn't someone who didn't care about the big picture. She would probably forget about this matter in 2 or 3 years. Her brain was only the size of a walnut. With his hands behind his back, he swayed out of the hall with a proud look on his face. Looking at the sky, it was getting dark. The radio station had been going on for about an hour. Where's Erhua? Forget it, you won't know even if I ask you. Ren Baqin waved his hand after asking. Erhua still hadn't appeared at this time, so she was probably at Shanhui House, which was about to become her second home. The older Erhua got, the more straightforward he became. He wasn't as cold as the Empress, nor was he like Ren Baqin. Instead, he liked to make friends from all walks of life. He liked to make friends at Shanhui House and would often treat everyone to drinks. After 2 years, Erhua had made a lot of scoundrels. Ren Baqin ordered someone to capture Erhua. He walked in the palace with his hands clasped behind his back as he pondered. He didn't know how the foreign races would react. Would they send a small number of experts or a large army? The latter was more likely to be the case. However, the number of troops wouldn't be too big. It was best to keep them busy and give them some trouble. He didn't know if those alien races had enough food resources. Otherwise, he could just destroy a large area of their cultivation. Ren Baqin's expression suddenly changed. If the foreign races didn't have enough food, it wouldn't be the mid-level races or the powerful races that would starve. Instead, they would exploit the weaker races even more. If the pressure reached a certain level, it might cause a rebound. Even among humans, if they were squeezed to a certain extent, there would also be a backlash. Therefore, he had always used a combination of suppression, pacification, and integration with the Yun nation. The foreign races might not have such an opinion. Unfortunately, he didn't know anything about the situation of the foreign races at present. If he could develop a group of spies among them, at the thought of this, Ren Baqin shook his head. The human race was the enemy of the foreign races. However, he stopped after taking a few steps. It was true that the human race was the enemy of the foreign races, but it didn't mean that there wouldn't be people from the foreign races who would seek refuge with them. Apart from the population, every life was an independent individual with its own thoughts and desires. At the thought of this, Ren Baqin suddenly had some hazy ideas. He quickly walked to the main hall where Lolita was and told her about his ideas to help him analyze them. The cabinets in the main hall flashed wildly for more than 10 seconds before Lolita said, "Do you know that there's a crime called pyramid selling?" "Yes, that's it." Ren Baqin clapped his hands and laughed loudly. "I actually forgot about this. Pyramid selling can make people crazy, confuse their eyes and minds, and make them devote everything to a false goal. It can even make people deceive themselves for a better future. Even if they know that it's fake, they will make themselves believe that it's true." Lolita described the effects of pyramid selling to Ren Baqin. "Yes, that's it." Ren Baqin's mind suddenly became clear. He had used this trick in the past and deliberately threw a monk into Tianjin Basin. It had been 14 or 15 years since then, and Buddhism had developed rapidly in Tianjin Basin. It had to be said that it had played a significant role in stabilizing Tianjin Basin. If they were to combine the ideas of MLM and Buddhism, and then spread it to the weaker races, they were originally at the bottom of many races and couldn't see a future after being bullied. As long as there weren't experts at the level of the human emperor, this would always be the case. If he gave them hope, the more he thought about it, the more excited he got. Unfortunately, his previous line of thought had been limited by the fact that the human race and the foreign races couldn't coexist. He had forgotten that the foreign races weren't monolithic, but were divided into strong, medium, and weak races. Each of them had different desires. Even if they were of the same rank, their desires were completely different. Fortunately, it's not too late. Although the longer it takes, the greater the effect. No one knows how long it will take for the foreign races to react. Even if it's a short period of time, we can at least develop some informants, obtain some information about the foreign races, and even cause some destruction. Come. Ren Baqin shouted as he went out. "Your Highness, send word to Tianjin Basin that Xing Ruo is coming to see me. Let him bring a few disciples with outstanding eloquence," Ren Baqin said. "Your Highness, huh? Who's Xing Ruo? A monk? He should be quite famous in Tianjin Basin. As long as you pass on my orders, someone will naturally be able to do it," Ren Baqin replied. "In addition, go and ask the laboratory how many of those foreign races are still alive. It's best if they're a little younger but not too young," Ren Baqin instructed. After the guards left, Ren Baqin walked around the courtyard a few times and waited for the little monk Xing Ruo to come. Considering his age, he should be a monk by now. Rinpoche needed to combine the ideas of Buddhism with pyramid selling and ask him to brainwash the foreign races. He wasn't sure if Xingrua would agree. No matter what, he had to agree even if he didn't agree. In any case, Rinpoche was still the arhat that Xingrua mentioned, and he hoped that Xingrua wouldn't be too stubborn. After thinking for a while, Rinpoche instructed another guard, go to the rearguard commandery and ask them to report on the development of Buddhism in Tianjin Basin over the past few years. Find out who the important figures are, including Xingrua's style of doing things, their hobbies, and their social relations. In addition, inform righteous sect leader Lin Dong to make a trip to the capital. Rinpoche suddenly remembered that Lin Dong was also an expert in dealing with evil cults. This was his job after all. He was prepared to use both orthodox and evil cults together with pyramid selling. As for whether this Pandora's box would cause any future trouble, that would be discussed later. No matter what, it wasn't as important as dealing with the foreign races. First, set a small goal, for example, 1 second. Chapter 1165. Class dismissed. Today's homework is this formula. Handed in 3 days. I don't want to see anyone copy the wrong name again. Qing Lian put away the book on the podium and left the classroom with it in her arms. What are you so proud of? A group of teenagers curled their lips and looked at the formula projected on the wall in front of them. They screamed hysterically and scratched their heads. Ah, this damned great Xia woman. Ah, the wailing of a defeated dog is really pleasant to listen to. Qing Lian maintained an elegant smile as she walked around the campus. I like to see your helpless faces when you want to kill me. The questions this time are still too easy, but we have to do it step by step to prevent them from complaining. We can use more difficult questions next time. She turned the corner and saw a delicate girl in a fluttering white dress. You're actually still alive. The corners of Tong Lan's mouth twitched when she saw Qing Lian, and she gave a spurious smile. You actually haven't graduated yet? After Qing Lian said this, she saw that Tong Lan's expression had completely frozen. I hope I can give you a graduation certificate one day. Qing Lian pursed her lips and smiled as she walked past Tong Lan. Tong Lan let out a series of hysterical screams after Qing Lian had left for a long time. You can't beat her in a verbal battle. Shurgan, who had been maintaining a calm expression, finally spoke. You can't beat her either. Shurgan continued to stab her. Shurgan, I will fight it out with you. Tong Lan was going crazy. Tong Lan chased him back to the laboratory and sighed. When are we going to graduate? Soon. Aren't we going to graduate next year? We are only 1 year away. Just bear with it. The girl nearby frowned. Even though she was consoling Tong Lan, she was also at a loss when this matter was brought up. Yes. High school, university, and postgraduate. God knows what will happen after postgraduate. I feel that I won't be able to hold on until the day of graduation. I don't see any pain at all. When you graduate, remember to ask your grandson to burn the graduation certificate for me. Su Peng clutched his head and squatted on the ground as he lamented. Everyone's faces turned ugly when they heard this. It was obvious that Tong Lan had touched their sore spot. Have you calculated the engine data of the Wingspan 112? Haven't you calculated it yet? Who asked you to be lazy? Tong Lan's mood worsened, and she immediately vented her anger on the others. Qing Lian put the lesson plan back in the office, put on a pair of rose-red, metal-framed glasses and wrote the letter. She was different from XNJ, the bespectacled girl who was 5 meters tall and couldn't tell the difference between humans and animals. He found a noodle shop outside the school. It sold potato noodle or sweet potato noodle stew. After the meal, he began to have nothing to do. He walked to a corner of the campus and looked at the students who were making calls to their families from the public phone booth. He was a little dazed. Life here was pretty good. There weren't many messy things to do. All he had to do was go to class and research his favorite mathematics. Other than that, she also felt a little lonely. After all, as long as one was human, they would need to socialize. He wanted to make a phone call like those people, but he didn't know who to call. There was no family. Friends, no. He used to have a partner, Su Qing, but he didn't want to receive a call from him, right? Qing Lian had a self-mocking smile on her face. Compared to other things, bickering with those students was more interesting. She felt like she wasn't alone. Just as she was mocking herself, she noticed a few strange people walking over from a distance. They were wearing clothes that didn't belong to any place. The first half of their bodies was a white robe, and the other half was made of pieces of red cloth sewn together and draped over their bodies. Behind them were a few people wearing long robes made of grayish-black cloth. They looked like beggars who were trying to patch up acne. However, these people were different. They were very clean and bald, which was quite rare outside of the Aboriginals. In any case, Qing Lian only knew one bald person like this. Not only was he bald, but he didn't even have eyebrows. His exposed skin also didn't have any hair. Amit Ba. This humble monk, Xing Rua, greets you. The few bald people suddenly stopped when they passed by Qing Lian. The one who looked delicate and pretty suddenly put his palms together and greeted her. Qing Lian suddenly remembered who these people were. They were from a very prosperous sect in Tianjin Basin called Buddhism. It seemed to have an unclear relationship with Zhao Prince consort. In recent years, it had been very prosperous in Tianjin Basin. Even some of the students who came from Tianjin Basin believed in this religion. What's the matter? Qing Lian looked at the delicate and pretty monk in front of her with a head full of question marks. This humble monk noticed that Benefactor paid some attention to us. It's fate that we met, so I wanted to have a chat with Benefactor. It's fate that we met? Qing Lian asked. Otherwise, why would we meet in this vast sea of people? Why would Benefactor pay attention to us? Why would we talk here? Xing Rua smiled. Qing Lian's mouth twitched. There must be a lot of fated people. Why not? Xing Rua smiled. Fated people and pitiful people. Who can distinguish the things in this world? If you can't break through the fog in your heart, you'll be like a fish in the water, unable to know yourself. Just as Qing Lian wanted to refute, her expression suddenly changed, and she seemed to have understood something. After a moment, she smiled and asked, "Is there a hidden meaning in your words?" "It's just nonsense." Xing Rua smiled, put his palms together and took his leave. As Qing Lian watched them leave, the inexplicable sense of loneliness disappeared without a trace, and the sense of alienation she felt from her surroundings also lessened. Who was that benefactor just now? A monk behind Xing Rua suddenly asked. He was a little puzzled and didn't know what Xing Rua's words meant. A fated person. Xing Rua chuckled. Greetings, Arhat. Xing Rua greeted Rinpoche. I haven't seen you for a long time and you've grown up. Rinpoche sized up the delicate and pretty monk who looked about 20 years old and smiled. Back then that monk was still quite likable. After not seeing him for so many years he had actually grown up. It's all superficial. Xing Rua smiled. Since it's superficial, why is this robe white? Rinpoche pointed at Xing Rua's monk robe. Because it looks good. Xing Rua said matter-of-factly. Rinpoche was shocked by Xing Rua's confident manner. I don't look at the surface but others do. Xing Rua continued with a smile. How could this delicate monk with fluttering white robes compare to a sloppy monk with a robe made of cloth? Rinpoche was speechless and then burst out laughing. This Xing Rua was very quick-witted. No wonder he created such a big situation in Tianjin Basin. Taking advantage of the chaos and riots in Tianjin Basin, as well as Rinpoche's support, Buddhism had almost spread throughout Tianjin Basin over the past decade. There were millions of believers and there were even dozens of temples. Xing Rua, who wasn't even 10 years old at that time, had created such a big situation in the past decade, which was really amazing. Furthermore, Xing Rua had set up an infinite treasury to store the things that the believers donated to the temple. If there was a natural disaster or someone had difficulty making a living, they would take it out and use it to help ordinary people. This move also allowed Buddhism to expand even faster. However, there were also many drawbacks. Although Xing Rua had good intentions, there were still some monks who filled their pockets and profited wantonly. This was what he learned from the report from the rearguard commandery. Chapter 1166. The two sat down and chatted for a while before Rinpoche said, Then close the boundless treasury. Disaster relief is the responsibility of the imperial court. If you do it, what will the imperial court do? Xing Rua remained calm and put his palms together. We will do as you say. Rinpoche nodded slightly and was satisfied with his attitude. Although this concerned the image of the imperial court, Rinpoche had good intentions. It was fine now, but in a few years, when the good and bad in Buddhism were mixed, the boundless treasury would be criticized. What do you think about races other than humans? Rinpoche asked. All living things are equal. What if their goal is to destroy the human race? Xing Rua raised his eyebrows and revealed a beautiful smile. Arhat will look at it however you say. Slippery? Rinpoche shook his head. Wasn't Xing Rua a little crooked? However, this little monk didn't seem to be very serious. You are the Arhat and I am a monk. How can we measure? Xing Ruo chuckled. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche somewhat understood what he meant. In this world, besides the human race, there are thousands of other races that are similar to humans. They are all intelligent beings and have their own thoughts. However, they are enemies of the human race, Rinpoche said slowly. Amit Ba, there is no liberation from all karma. Xing Ruo chanted. I won't tell you about many things. I came here this time because I want you to preach to them. However, it's not Zen. Please speak. Xing Ruo bowed slightly. Ajati Void Hometown, Rinpoche said. So it's the Ajati matriarch. Xing Ruo's expression changed slightly as he sighed. The Ajati matriarch, Void Hometown, came from the school of White Lotus, which came from the Pure Land sect. It was a mixture of many other sects and was divided into hundreds of small and large sections. It was very inclusive and could accommodate all kinds of systems. The teachings were simple, easy to practice and easy to spread. The simple teachings meant that they were easy to understand and remember. The easy to practice meant that it could be spread widely. This was also the reason why Rinpoche chose it. You actually know about the Ajati matriarch. Rinpoche was slightly surprised as Xing Ruo was less than 10 years old when he came. I've heard my master talk about it. That's good to hear. Rinpoche nodded. I hope to use the framework of the White Lotus School, with the Ajati matriarch and the Void Hometown as the foundation, and integrate the religion and ancestor worship of the foreign races. Every god of the foreign races must be integrated into it, either as the incarnation of the Ajati matriarch, or as the god sent by her. Xing Ruo lowered his head and pondered for a long time. He then sighed in his heart and said, Arhat has misled me. Rinpoche laughed and said, If you can use this opportunity to clean the bright mirror, how can you say that I have wronged you? Maybe it's to help you. Both of them had their reasons for saying that. If Xing Ruo did as Rinpoche said, he would start to talk nonsense and have delusions of grandeur. His mind would not be clear and it would be difficult for him to be cautious in the future. What Rinpoche meant was that if he took this opportunity to mix his thoughts with the various contents of the White Lotus Society, it would naturally be difficult for him to be careful. However, if he could clean his heart and rebuild it, he would be able to surpass his previous self. Let's do as you say, Xing Ruo said softly. Seeing that Xing Ruo had agreed, Rinpoche was delighted and smiled. I'll introduce someone to you later. He pondered in his heart. From a certain perspective, Lin Dong and Xing Ruo could be considered peers. When they met, they might have to address each other as fellow Taoist. After a few more days, Lin Dong arrived at the capital. Rinpoche and Lin Dong had a discussion first, and Lin Dong naturally agreed. Then, the three of them met and talked about the matter, including the White Lotus Society's philosophy, and discussed it together. For example, if one didn't receive them, one would die here, live there, die there, and live here. One would be trapped until reincarnation, suffer all kinds of hardships, and never be free. This was called wandering in one's hometown. On the other hand, the void hometown was filled with endless life and death hardships. Once one ascended to one's hometown, there would never be life and death, and one would be happy. In some ways, this was very similar to the so-called God Nation. It had to be said that even if humans had gone through different cultures, there were similarities in their imaginations and pursuits. Mixing in ancestor worship and some views of the righteous sect became the basic doctrine of the new White Lotus Society. After that, it would be used as a framework to incorporate the myths of the various foreign races to suit different groups. During the preaching process, various brainwashing methods would be used. For example, the 5-level 3-level system, the number of followers, the level of priests, what privileges would they enjoy when they were alive, and how they would be watched by the Ajati matriarch. For example, in terms of macroscopic ecology, every life was burdened with sins since birth. For example, some high-level priests would talk about how they used to be, what kind of life they led after joining the sect, how they helped each other, how they reached the peak of their lives with the help of other believers, and how they were watched by the Ajati matriarch. They could enjoy a better life when they were alive and directly enter the void hometown after death. They also had to forcibly associate the myths of the various races with the Ajati matriarch. These had to be done every day, and finally, a lie told 10,000 times would become the truth. In addition, not everyone could join the sect. Only those who were fated could join. As for what was considered fated, it would depend on the situation. Amit Ba. Listening to Rinpoche and Lin Dong talk about various things about the White Lotus Society and their preaching methods, Xing Ruo lowered his head and kept chanting the name of Buddha. He felt that his soul had been polluted, and it was as if he saw the 18 levels of hell waving at him. On the contrary, Lin Dong had been discussing with Ren Baqin in high spirits. For the first time he realized that Zhao Prince Consort was also good at setting up sections. Especially those so-called multi-level marketing methods. It was an eye-opener for him at the same time, it also enlightened him. Some of the theories of the White Lotus Society also allowed him to discover some shortcomings of Jingtian sect. As long as he was given some time in the future, he would be able to make Jingtian sect 10 times more prosperous. Listening to your Highness's words is better than reading 10,000 books. Lin Dong was overjoyed. Don't think too much. This is a last resort. Ren Baqin saw Lin Dong's devotion and joy and felt that this guy would be dangerous in the future. In the future he had to strictly control Jingtian sect and prevent it from spreading to Dayo. Otherwise it might cause trouble. After a few days Ren Baqin and Lin Dong settled on the teachings and other aspects. Even the name of the White Lotus Society would be changed to the new religion. In the future, depending on the situation of the various races, they could make changes to suit them. The next step was to look for some test subjects. Coincidentally, after the extermination of the foreign races in recent years, they had captured some weak foreign races. Many of them were teenagers and they would be used as test subjects. If they succeeded, they could use these test subjects to spread the new religion to the foreign races. As a mid-level race, it would be easier for them to do this. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1167. The Ajati matriarch is the mother of all gods, born in the endless darkness, immortal. You are all the children of the Ajati matriarch, you are all brothers and sisters. You have suffered all kinds of pain, humiliation and suffering, death here, life there, death there, life here, reincarnation in the 6 realms. Where is your hometown? You can't return to your hometown, you can't enjoy peace and joy forever. We don't believe in those ghosts and gods, our God is the Thunder Mother. The Thunder Mother will definitely defeat your god. A Thunder barbarian youth shouted angrily. What does your Thunder Mother look like? What's her story? The Thunder Mother is the source of all things, the ancestor of all living beings. Life is born from destruction. The Earth Mother is the ancestor of all living beings. The Water Goddess is all living beings are born from water. How do you know that the Thunder Mother is not the Ajati matriarch? How do you know that the Earth Mother and the Water Goddess are not the Ajati matriarch? There is only one world, there are so many gods, then who created the world? Which god is real? The Ajati matriarch is an eternal existence. You can't see or hear with your eyes, she is an eternal existence but she can't be seen, transcending time and space. You see the greenwood fangs, it's the Ajati matriarch. You see the kind face, it's also the Ajati matriarch. However you see her, she is how you see her. Do you think such an existence is limited to what we see? We are all the children of the Ajati matriarch because we see different things. We think they are different gods. The Ajati matriarch sent 3 gods divided into 3 periods to rule the world. The god of the past always exists in the past, the god of the present always exists in the present, and the god of the future exists in the eternal future. Just say, Ajati matriarch, void hometown, and you have fate with the Ajati matriarch. You are fated with the Ajati matriarch, hence you have a mark. No matter how long you sink into the sea of bitterness, you are still you. As long as the mark is still there, one day you will be brought back to the void hometown by the Ajati matriarch. In the void hometown, there is no distinction between men and women, there is no distinction between the top and the bottom. If there is a man and a woman, then there is a difference between a man and a woman. If there is a difference between a man and a woman, then there is a difference between a man and a woman. We have the same identity. We are the children of the Ajati matriarch. Every day in a house, a few people from the righteous sect in Xingrua would take turns to give lessons to the captured young people of the foreign tribes. They talked about God, pain, life, and all living beings. Children who received it well would be able to eat better food and live in better homes. Children who did not accept it well would be punished. Even in modern times, many people believed in these theories, not to mention these alien youngsters who had been captured and imprisoned and suffered so much. Besides, there were also food and other rewards. Under the constant brainwashing and various related hints in daily life, a fanatical atmosphere was created. In just half a month, half of the children were chanting, Ajati matriarch, void hometown. As for whether or not they truly believed in it like they did on the surface, that was not important. What was important was that they were a group. Every day the people around them believed in the Ajati matriarch, and they were all fanatical believers. After a long time, as the saying goes, a lie told 10,000 times is the truth. And before they were sent back, there would be another selection. With the lie detector, it would not be easy for these children to deceive them. Xing Ruo once again left that place. There was no expression on his face, but his eyes were filled with pain and confusion. In order to protect his disciples, he took the initiative to bear the responsibility that he and his disciples should bear, so that they would not sink into that fanatical atmosphere. Even he had been greatly affected these days, let alone those disciples. As he walked, he chanted softly, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. When he was deep in the Prajna Paramitha, he saw that the 5 aggregates were empty, and he passed through all sufferings. Sarira, form is not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Perception, action, and consciousness are also the same. Big monk, big monk. The crisp voice of a young girl woke Xing Ruo up. When he looked up, he realized that he had arrived at the door of the house of Shanhui. A young girl in a blue dress, who looked to be about 13 or 14 years old, was sitting behind the table with one leg propped up on the chair, waving at him. Ba, so it's your highness. Xing Ruo chuckled and walked in. A few youths from the aboriginals turned their heads to look at him before turning back again. Big monk, do you want a drink today? It's my treat. Hua happily called out to Xing Ruo. The money today belongs to the princess, right? Xing Ruo smiled. Every time he saw this princess, he would be in a good mood. Although monks didn't care about many things, he had a good impression of this straightforward and unpretentious young girl. Every time he chatted with her, he would be in a good mood. Otherwise, he would have had a hard time these days. Hua rolled his eyes and smiled. Then I'll treat you with my money. Xing Ruo burst out laughing. Your Highness, use your own money to treat us as well, the aboriginal youth beside him shouted. Hua grabbed his money pouch, flipped it open and said in distress, Then you can't drink as much as you want. 1 cup is enough. After this, Your Highness can use my cousin's money to treat us to more drinks. The youth laughed. Hua wrinkled his nose. Xiongyan doesn't have much money. Everyone burst out laughing again. These people were the children of high-ranking officials, and Hua had robbed many of their younger siblings' pocket money. However, although they looked like they were being bullied, Hua was very loyal when they were in trouble. In addition, they often drank together at Shanhui House, so they didn't mind at all. I'll pay for each jar of wine on the table. Give me a side dish and a plate of braised beef, Hua shouted. Immediately, the surrounding people cheered, Thank you, Your Highness. Big monk, tell me a story, Hua said. I don't want to listen to stories about cutting meat to feed the eagles. I want to listen to Monkey Son. I like that monkey. Although she had heard stories about Monkey Son on Earth, she liked listening to Xing Ruo. Xing Ruo would always comment on something and she found it very interesting. The princess has the personality of the great sage, so of course she likes him. However, in exchange, how about you sing a song? Xing Ruo asked with a smile. Hua immediately agreed. Xing Ruo continued talking until the lanterns were lit. Shanhui House was filled with people and not long after it was full. Let's call it a day. I've talked so much that my mouth is dry. Xing Ruo changed the topic. Hua didn't have enough. He looked around and saw that everyone was listening to his story. He immediately said, If you tell a story, the boss will be happy. You're very welcome. A big man outside the crowd laughed and asked someone to bring a jar of wine. This is for Your Highness and the monk. Thank you, Hua said happily. Since we've drunk the wine, it's time for Your Highness to sing. This is the boss's. If you want to listen, you have to buy me a drink. Hua said with a smile. Since Your Highness wants to sing, I'll sing for everyone here today. Suddenly, a woman's voice was heard. Sister Qinglian. Hua stood on a chair and greeted her with a smile. A moment later, people outside the Shanhui House could hear hands tapping on the table, and a young girl's clear voice could be heard. Looking down at the blue dragon moving, looking down at the lonely mountain, looking down at the world's peace song, I bend my body to the sky. Holding the white jade brush, please write about my true nature. I have a jar of old wine for you. P.S. Yi Xiaoyan's song of inviting wine to appear. It was a song that he liked. It was very grand. Chapter 1168. Send these 7 children to the border between the 2 worlds. You will also be responsible for the rest. First, establish a foothold and then expand into the surrounding areas. What you have to do is to investigate the customs and appearance of the foreign races, especially the movements of the experts and when they will attack us. This is the most important thing. Secondly, expand as much as possible under the premise of self-preservation. In addition, don't forget to do your daily homework along the way. We don't have enough time here. However, we still need to spend half a year on the road. Make sure they are completely brainwashed and don't have the slightest inclination to escape. If they have that inclination, kill them immediately. Compared to the foreign races, we are too weak. Any small disturbance will cause us to suffer heavy losses. If the foreign races attack us with all their might, we can only face destruction. Remember, you can't afford to take the risk, let alone the human race, Rinpoche said as he sat in the seat of honor. Don't worry, Your Highness. I will go with you this time. Lin Dong cupped his hands. Thank you, Rinpoche said in a deep voice. In addition, you can command remotely. If you can find a suitable disguise, you might as well explore the territory of the foreign races. Rinpoche looked solemn. This matter was of great importance. Time was too short. The human race had too little time to develop and prepare. If the foreign races attacked with all their might now, he would have no choice but to escape with the Empress and heir Hua. Until they developed their own spaceship technology, the human race would be able to attack and defend. As for the rest, it would depend on whether the experts of the human race could withstand the experts of the foreign races. As long as they could contend with the upper ranks of the foreign races, it would be easier to deal with the middle and lower ranks. No matter how many ordinary troops there were, it was just a matter of one nuclear bomb. If one wasn't enough, then another would be used. This time, Lin Dong personally led a few experts of the righteous sect and 7 completely brainwashed foreign race teenagers to the Lansang territory to develop a group of disciples among the foreign races. In addition to setting up spies, he also wanted to find an opportunity to slow down the foreign races. The next day, Rinpoche brought Lin Dong and the others to the airport outside the capital. What's this? Lin Dong looked at the plane in front of him. It looks different from those tractors and trucks. It's much bigger and looks like a bird. Take this plane, Rinpoche said with a smile. If we take this now, we can reach Clear Valley. It's 3,000 miles deeper than Wuxia City. We can save half a year. Fly over? Oh. No wonder Your Highness said that the journey would take half a year. I originally thought that it would take at least a year. Lin Dong circled the plane a few times and said with interest. There's nothing you can do if you're airsick, but don't be rash. We're in the sky, Rinpoche reminded as he suddenly recalled something. Over the past 2 years, there had been more than one case where some idiot got airsick and smashed a hole in the fuselage to get some air. One of them directly caused the plane to crash into one of the 60,000 mountains. Only a few people managed to escape from the crash. However, the reason why the plane had failed to land was probably because those people had escaped. Before the plane had even landed, it had been hit by the people who were running for their lives. The plane had almost fallen apart. That's right, all planes were equipped with landing hills. If they encountered any problems, they could just parachute and escape. However, some people escaped too quickly. They tore the plane apart and escaped. Fortunately, planes were mainly used to transport cargo, so there weren't many casualties. Unfortunately, all the cargo on that plane was buried in the sea of fire. Lin Dong happily boarded the plane with anticipation. The noise of the plane taking off finally made him understand where the loud noise he occasionally heard in the capital these days came from. One shouldn't expect Dayo's planes to be very comfortable. With the loud noise and extreme flight experience, taking a plane wasn't as relaxing as riding a roller coaster. As soon as the plane took off, the 7 foreign youths and a few experts from the righteous sect looked at the ground outside the window, which was getting smaller and smaller. They didn't expect Dayo to have reached this stage. Zhao Prince Consort is amazing. Lin Dong looked out of the window and smacked his lips. To be able to make the Empress fall in love with him, he naturally has something extraordinary about him, someone beside him said with a smile. That's right. Many people thought that it was incredible. If those people were here now, they would probably find it even more incredible, Lin Dong said with a smile. When the Empress set the engagement, it shocked many people. Before that, they were all curious about what kind of person could make the Empress fall in love with him. In the end, it was a little guy who hadn't even reached the man-wheel level. Looking back now, everyone's thoughts at that time were indeed quite funny. However, very soon no one paid attention to Lin Dong's sigh. Their faces were pale, and their hands were tightly gripping the handles to resist the violent turbulence of the plane's ascent. Let me tell you, all of you, sit down obediently. We are in the sky. Lin Dong repeated what Rinpoche had just said to everyone. I know. Even if we die, we will die here. Su Jiaojiao, who was holding Lin Dong's left and right hands, was pale. Stop talking about dying. It's still too early to die. I still want to see what the god of the foreign races looks like. The god is immortal, yet he calls himself a god. How arrogant. Lin Dong curled his lips. No, I want to vomit. A foreign youth suddenly shouted. Oh, go. Alright, I swallowed it. Ugh. At this moment, everyone was holding the bags in front of them and vomiting. The plane was filled with a pungent sour smell. Oh, I want to open the windows to get some fresh air. Lin Dong couldn't help but sigh. One day later, everyone arrived at Inchuan City and had to rest here before heading to Qing Valley. As soon as the plane landed, everyone rushed out of the plane with weak footsteps. After a day of turbulence, especially during the ascent and descent, everyone felt that they would die if they sat any longer. The ground crew immediately carried buckets to wash up. Hey Wuxia, why did you vomit too? Suhu also vomited? Don't mention it. There was a guy on the plane who vomited, and then swallowed it back. The two flight crew members looked ashen-faced. Now that you mention it, I want to vomit too. The ground crew members' faces immediately changed. This scene and smell were too strong. On this plane, the only people who weren't affected were Lin Dong and the two pilots. After Lin Dong got off the plane, he calmly looked at the mountain city that was built around the mountain in the distance. At this time, Rinpoche had returned to Earth. The spacecraft that returned from the Horn Dragon Galaxy had returned. In addition to bringing back a large number of animal and plant mineral samples from the Horn Dragon Galaxy, it also brought back some specific parameters of the two galaxies. For example, the time difference between the two worlds that Rinpoche had always been concerned about. Chapter 1169. I heard that the Easterners used to be rather thin and weak, but now they have all become strong and healthy. Look at the leader. He looks fierce and strong, but I think I'm fiercer. Well, what do you think? A white man was running on the field. When he saw the people in front of him, he flexed his arms to bulge his muscles. Shut your beak, Johnny, if you don't want to die. The big guy beside him suddenly changed his expression and stopped him. Why are you so timid? Alright, I admit that those Easterners are indeed quite good at fighting. However, this is the International Space Center. Although we are in their territory, they won't do anything to you. You are too timid. The big guy called Johnny spread his hands and was very dissatisfied with his companion's cautiousness. Besides, I also said that he's very strong, but I think I'm stronger. Damn it. I'll say it again. Shut your beak and others won't do anything to you. That person is different. Will was about to go crazy. It wasn't a big deal to be arrogant, but shouldn't he have some foresight? Do you know him? Nonsense, I really wonder if your brain is full of dog-sh*t. Will said angrily. He then lowered his voice and said, Gotham City, the disaster that happened more than a decade ago. Johnny thought for a while and then came to a realization. The devil from the east? When I was watching that video, I kept paying attention to that chick in red. She's really charming. Fuck. Will cursed. He finally understood what it meant to be afraid of a pig-like teammate instead of a godlike opponent. Is that so? I also think that she's very charming. A magnetic man's voice came from the side. Will turned his head and saw a bald man with no eyebrows and no hair. Under the sunlight, the man's bald head reflected light like metal. You have good taste. Rinpoche smiled very kindly. You are really enviable, lucky brother. Johnny was stunned when he saw Rinpoche. He didn't expect Rinpoche to hear him from so far away. He then praised him. His words were full of envy. The other party's reaction and words were somewhat unexpected. Rinpoche was prepared to stuff him into the ground so that he wouldn't have to look at women for the rest of his life. However, he changed his mind. Although that's the truth, don't talk about someone else's wife behind their back, especially when the other party can casually plant you like a sunflower, Rinpoche said lightly and drifted away. It wasn't until Rinpoche and the others were far away that Will felt as if he had been granted amnesty. His clothes were drenched in sweat. He yelled at Johnny, You bastard, stay away from me in the future. Rinpoche didn't come here only for the return of the spacecraft. Although this matter was very important to everyone on Earth. However, Rinpoche already knew what he wanted to know. The time difference between the Horn Dragon Galaxy and Earth was 7 to 9. This meant that 7 hours in the Horn Dragon Galaxy would be 9 hours on Earth. The time difference between Dayo and Earth was far from that huge. As for passing through the nodes of the curve, it did not take much time. At most, it would take no more than 3 days. This number made many people excited. As for the specimens brought back by the spaceship, He was only interested in the research results. He only wanted to know what the specimens could bring, not what they were. Half a day later, Rinpoche looked at the equipment that was half the size of a room, frowned and asked, "Can this thing be smaller?" "Maybe in the future, but it can't be done now. This thing requires a large amount of positive and negative charges to be injected into an area in a short period of time to achieve a certain potential difference between the upper and lower layers of the cumulonimbus cloud. This is the so-called thunderstorm." A bespectacled middle-aged man shrugged. Rinpoche pondered for a moment and looked at the image displayed on the screen beside him. 3 tornadoes that looked like earth dragons connected the sky and the earth, sweeping everything between heaven and earth. He couldn't help but be tempted. What if there are no cumulonimbus clouds? Can it be artificially created? Can it be used on the ground? In theory it can be done, but it requires more energy, more power, and more accurate charge injection. It will take at least a few years to conduct various tests. If the progress is slow, I'm afraid it will take more than 10 years. How long can the created tornadoes last? Probably from 10 minutes to 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the specific environment and weather conditions. Rinpoche thought about it and was still tempted. Someone will talk to you later. Rinpoche was quite optimistic about this weather weapon. Even if it couldn't do anything to the experts of the foreign races, it could sweep through the rear of the foreign races, whether it was the grain transport team, the fertile soil for planting, or even the granary. With the speed of the tornadoes, they could sweep through an area in 30 to 40 minutes. Moreover, the other party wouldn't have thought that the power of heaven and earth was actually artificially created. "Where's Professor Arvid?" Rinpoche turned around and looked for him. "I want to see your system." A moment later, Rinpoche, led by another team, saw 3 sets of equipment being assembled on the spacecraft. To be precise, there were 3 sets of laser cannons. More than a decade ago, Rinpoche had seen this thing in the United States and its power. After more than a decade of development, the application of nuclear energy on Earth had become more mature and had shrunk a lot. The same was true for the laser cannons. This time they were installed on the spacecraft and didn't need to be launched from the ground to the satellite and then bounced back. The caliber was also much larger at 15 centimeters. Previously, due to the problem of the reflection angle, the duration of each attack was extremely short. Now, it could last up to 3 seconds and continuously output a laser beam. With this size and performance, Rinpoche could reluctantly accept it. However, in his opinion, it would be best if they could shrink to a size of 1 meter while maintaining their power. That way there would be hope for them to become individual weapons. These 2 sets of equipment were installed on the spacecraft. This time, the spacecraft was heading to the Triangulum Galaxy again for an extremely important mission, which was to try to contact and communicate with the Thunder Barbarians. These 2 sets of equipment were the fists that Earth had displayed in this aspect. If the communication didn't go well, depending on the situation, they would decide whether to use force to deter them. Rinpoche was happy to see this happen. He wanted to see how these weapons would perform in actual combat. If the 2 sides could really communicate, it would be a good thing. Rinpoche would be able to find out some information about the foreign races and might even be able to learn some clues about the Thunder Barbarians on Zixiao planet. For example, why were they there? Rinpoche even had the idea of going there personally to observe. In any case, he spent most of his time in Dayo, and the duration of space travel wasn't too much of a problem for him. However, after thinking about the risks, Rinpoche dispelled this idea. No one knew if their shuttle would be affected when they were near the curved nodes. This was the universe, and communication between 2 places couldn't even be done now. If there was even the slightest impact while he was shuttling, it might cause the most tragic consequences. It was better to stay on Earth. Chapter 1170. Are you going to make a move tonight? Rinpoche heard the news as soon as he returned to Dayo. The caravan has already left and will come again in at least a year. This is the time to make a move. These foreign tribes can't be allowed to stay any longer, the Empress replied from the other end of the radio station. Rinpoche was silent for a while before saying, "Be careful." He couldn't tell what was in the Empress's laughter, but he felt that it was more of a sneer. The Empress's next words confirmed his suspicions. "You asked me to bite you when I return. I remember that." Rinpoche thought for a while before recalling what he had said a few days ago. "Come back and bite me if you dare." He laughed dryly and said, "I was just joking. You don't have to be so serious, right?" The Empress smiled coldly and said, "An emperor doesn't joke. You are the regent, so you naturally have to keep your words." Rinpoche was a little embarrassed and asked, "Can I bite your D*CK?" The Empress's face turned green and immediately hung up. Ignoring the strange expressions of the people around her, she looked at the tribe in the distance, which was still lit up, and coldly ordered, "Do it!" Ha 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 ha. Before anyone could make any other expressions, one of the tall and sturdy ancient race men laughed out loud. Following his laughter, dozens of people rushed into the darkness with bloodthirsty laughter. "This bunch of lunatics. Bloodthirsty maniacs." Fire Snake Tao Chen laughed. These days he already knew what the savages of the Aboriginals were like. They were the type that would itch if they didn't stir up trouble for a day. The Aboriginals in Lan City were only slightly more barbaric than the Great Xia people, but at least they could maintain a certain level of order and communicate. The best way to deal with these guys who popped out of nowhere was with their fists. If people were divided into lawful good, lawful neutral, and lawful evil, chaotic evil, etc., Tao Chen believed that he was lawful neutral, while these lunatics were the typical chaotic evil. Pure Metal Child tilted his head slightly, indicating that the biggest lunatic was behind him. "Do it." Su Gongso, who was using the sun and moon in the palm, shouted. More than half of the remaining experts disappeared into the darkness. The remaining experts who hadn't even condensed their heaven-grade weapons stayed on the periphery, ready to stop the foreign tribes that ran out. The roar of a beast could be heard from afar. Even from afar, one could feel the ferocity of the roar. Then there was a loud boom. The Empress moved her feet and flew into the air. In a few steps she was near the village. Her eyes were red, and the darkness couldn't obstruct her vision. A 30-meter-long beast that looked like a giant rhinoceros but had an extremely long tail was charging towards a human figure that was much weaker than it. The figure didn't respond. He slid back dozens of meters, then flipped over and rushed behind the giant rhinoceros. The giant rhinoceros raised its head, opened its mouth, and spat out a mouthful of fire, lighting up half the night sky. The figure let out a painful groan and fell from the sky. He hurriedly dodged the giant rhinoceros's crazy trampling. He didn't even have time to check his injury before he flipped over and threw himself behind the giant rhinoceros. The spear in his hand smoothly stabbed into the side of the giant rhinoceros, but compared to the giant rhinoceros's size, the spear was equivalent to a toothpick. In addition, there was also a longevity celestial plane expert from the Earth and Spirit clan. With a roar, he flew up into the sky from the camp. The Empress glanced at them and could tell that this beast and the Earth and Spirit clan expert were at the intermediate level of the longevity heaven. This beast had thick skin and strong vitality. On the other hand, the Earth and Spirit clan expert already had the ability to fly in the sky. Both of them were quite difficult to deal with. However, the Earth and Spirit clan expert could run away, but this beast might not be able to. The Empress thought of something and took a step toward the Earth and Spirit clan expert. When the Earth and Spirit clan expert saw that the group of people who rushed in at night were the humans that the herdsman had mentioned before, he immediately roared and pounced down. "Get lost." The burly Aboriginal man was called Xan Cho. As he roared, the sky seemed to explode with a sudden clap of thunder. The foreign races that rushed out suddenly felt pain in their ears and felt dizzy. Xan Cho's twisted and coarse mace smashed forward, and a strong wind suddenly blew within a radius of 100 meters. Unexpectedly, the Earth and Spirit clan expert didn't dodge. He blocked the mace with one hand and directly stabbed Xan Cho's chest with the other. Die. Xan Cho's muscles bulged and he didn't retreat even half a step. Just as the opponent's hand was about to grab his chest, he slightly twisted his body to avoid the attack on his heart. With a hideous smile on his face, he continued to smash the mace in his hand. Pfft. The right hand of the foreign race expert immediately pierced through Xan Cho's chest. However, Xan Cho threw away the mace in his hand and smashed into a house in front of him with Shen air. His two arms were like iron hoops as he hugged the waist of the Earth and Spirit clan expert. His face was red and his veins were bulging. It was as if he was squeezing the waist of the Earth and Spirit clan expert. The Earth and Spirit clan expert roared crazily, but he couldn't break free because they were only one level apart. The Empress descended from the sky and smashed the head of the Earth and Spirit clan expert into pieces with one palm. Then she used her fingers to cut off the arm of the Earth and Spirit clan expert in disgust. Ha ha ha. Xan Cho's chest was pierced by an arm. He was breathing heavily, but he also let out a rather creepy laugh. "The next time you die, I will find a good home for your corpse. I will put it in the stomach of a fearsome beast," the Empress said unhappily. "Ha ha, I'm not dead yet." Xianqiu laughed heartily. As he slowly pulled his arm out of his chest, he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. However, just as he was about to pull his arm out, the hand suddenly moved and grabbed the side. If he hadn't sensed that something was wrong, his heart would have been grabbed out. Even so, he still managed to grab out half of his broken lung. He's not dead. The Empress was slightly stunned and then shocked. It was no wonder that this Earth and Spirit clan expert died so quickly and didn't even have the strength to resist. Of course, there was Xianqiu's craziness, but there was also something strange about this. She saw that the Earth and Spirit clan expert's completely broken head was gradually recovering. It crawled up from the ground and pounced towards the Empress while swaying. Immediately, the Empress kicked its upper body into pieces. The Empress frowned slightly. She saw the flesh on the half of the corpse wriggling, and the part that was completely broken by the Empress's kick actually began to grow back. In the distance, the giant rhinoceros-like beast knocked away the aboriginal expert and madly rushed towards the Empress. Every step it took caused a tremor in the ground. The Empress ignored the beast, looked at the half of the corpse and sneered, "You want to grow back? It's not that easy." She immediately stepped forward and stomped on the corpse. The half-recovered corpse immediately exploded, and flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The beast rushed over and first opened its mouth to spit out a stream of fire. After forcing the Empress back, it turned around and swept its long tail with a horny meat hammer, smashing Xianqiu away. The Empress suddenly felt that the vitality of this beast seemed to have decreased a little. She looked at the flesh and blood of the Earth and Spirit clan expert. Every piece of flesh was wriggling on the ground as if they were all alive. Countless pieces of flesh and blood quickly gathered in one place. The Empress immediately guessed what was going on. However, she still felt that it was a little unbelievable. She had never encountered or even heard of such a situation before. However, these foreign races each had their own strengths. She turned her head and looked around. In the other battles, the humans had the upper hand. The furry Earth and Spirit clan didn't seem to be good at fighting. Instead, they were better at taming beasts. In the battlefield, a few foreign races surrounded an extremely powerful beast and fought with the human experts. The Empress immediately understood that the Earth and Spirit clan wasn't good at fighting. Although this Earth and Spirit clan expert had an extremely strange and strong vitality and could revive even if he was smashed into pieces, the problem probably didn't lie with him. Instead, it was with the giant beast that had a slightly weaker aura. "I just need to kill a few more times and I will know," the Empress guessed. She was neither shocked nor angry and only sneered. This person's combat power was so weak. So what if he could live a few more times? It would just take a little more effort. Chapter 1171. Seeing that the gigantic beast had sent the ancient race longevity heaven expert flying, the female Empress descended and punched the gigantic beast's head, producing a loud, dull sound. W. However, the Empress felt a strong rebounding force from her punch, and the giant beast only roared angrily. Its body moved, and its giant head came crashing towards the Empress like a moving mountain. The Empress moved and barely dodged it. She frowned slightly. Although this giant beast wasn't fast, its body was extremely strong. Even though she was one level higher than it, she couldn't do anything to it in a short period of time. The Empress was slightly tempted. This giant beast wasn't suitable for fighting experts, but was more suitable for killing on a large scale. The threat of such a giant beast on the battlefield was many times greater than those of the same level. If she could tame this beast, the Empress looked down at the wriggling flesh and blood, and a strange look appeared in her eyes. The pile of flesh and blood crawled together and formed 3 bodies of the longevity heaven experts from the Earth spirit race. Although only half of them had been formed, given enough time, perhaps 3 of them would really appear. This ability is really strange, the Empress thought to herself. At this moment, several balls of flames appeared out of thin air and ignited the 3 bodies. Ma Hongyu saw this and waved her brush in the air. After Ma Hongyu broke through to the heaven and earth domain, the distance she could draw in the air was much further. Previously it was only 100 meters, but now it was close to 1,000 meters. Furthermore, its power was several times stronger. The scorching smell of the flames and human bodies was disgusting. However, the 3 bodies split apart and fell from the body along with the flames. The flesh and blood below continued to grow. The giant beast roared at Ma Hongyu, then covered the 3 corpses with its body. This is interesting. The Empress's eyes were bloodshot. She moved and punched the giant beast with her fists like heavy rain, producing a series of dull thuds. Roar! The gigantic beast was probably hurt by the Empress's beating. Its body thrashed wildly on the ground as if it wanted to knock down the Empress who was above it. Ma Hongyu, keep an eye on those 3 corpses. Don't destroy them and don't let them come back to life. The Empress reminded Ma Hongyu while she was dodging. Her voice echoed throughout the battlefield. Previously, she had sensed that there seemed to be a connection between this remnant body and the gigantic beast. The gigantic beast had thick skin and flesh, making this remnant body much easier to deal with. Ma Hongyu's ability was extremely suitable for destroying the body of that alien under the protection of that fierce beast. Before the Empress opened her mouth, Ma Hongyu had been paying attention to this place. In other words, Ma Hongyu was paying attention to the situation on the battlefield. Whenever she saw a situation, she would help. Ma Hongyu's ability to see through the gazes of every corner of the battlefield, as well as his methods that were hard to defend against, were completely revealed at this moment. A ferocious beast pounced on an ancient race cardinal heaven expert. The eyes of the Earth Spirit clan member flashed, and he seized the opportunity to throw the spear in his hand. However, Ma Hongyu's brush swept up a small whirlwind in the air. Dust flew in the wind, immediately blocking the Earth Spirit clan member's line of sight. Following which, a stone pillar appeared out of thin air. The humans had the absolute advantage on the battlefield. This wasn't a common occurrence, but it happened from time to time. Sometimes, a few alien races would gather together and suddenly, flames or other things would appear out of thin air and disrupt their formation. Ma Hongyu's attention would always appear where it was needed. This kind of gaze that was as sharp as a knife could cut open the entire battlefield. He was always able to take action at the right time and control the situation. Coupled with his ability, he wasn't considered strong among the experts of the longevity heaven or the heaven and earth domain. In fact, he was at the bottom. However, coupled with his accurate gaze, he was always able to play a unique role. Naturally, he had always been paying attention to the position where the Empress was. Seeing that the gigantic beast got up and frantically attacked the Empress, Ma Hongyu pondered for a moment before stretching out his brush and waving it in the air. In just a moment, more than a dozen rather ugly stray dogs with missing ears and tails rushed forward to bite the remnant body parts. The gigantic beast was furious, but it was difficult to deal with such small and numerous creatures. With a swipe of its tail, the stray dogs and the remnant body parts would probably be turned into minced meat. Just as it was hesitating, a few stray dogs actually tore a few pieces of flesh from the remnant body parts and swallowed them. These stray dogs weren't strong or fast, and they weren't even comparable to a man-wheel expert. However, their teeth were extremely sharp. When Ma Hongyu was drawing, he added a sharp reflection to the teeth of the stray dogs. Half an hour later, most of the battles on the battlefield had ended. There were corpses of the alien races and flames everywhere. There was only one place where the battle hadn't stopped. The gigantic beast was still raging, but the Empress was like a mosquito to it. There was also a group of stray dogs below that took advantage of the situation to tear apart the remnant body parts that the beast was protecting. Currently, there were only 5 remnant bodies left. Under Ma Hongyu's harassment, they couldn't grow to more than half of their original size. If one were to sense carefully, they would realize that the life force of the gigantic beast was slipping away at an even faster rate. According to the plan, everyone will head to the Thousand Bone Races tribe. Be careful of the experts who will come to investigate and assist us. Rest 15 kilometers away from the Thousand Bone Races tribe until the battle ends here, the Empress said as she dodged a stream of fire in the air. This gigantic beast didn't have many means of attack. Other than relying on its tyrannical body, it could only spit fire from its mouth. After the Empress grasped its rhythm, she was able to easily lead it and was doing it with ease. Most of the people on the battlefield dispersed after hearing the Empress's command. Only a small number of people watched from afar. The remnant body parts of the gigantic beast were constantly being destroyed and regenerated. Everyone seemed to be able to vaguely hear the beast's soundless howls of anger. 4 hours later, just as the Empress had guessed, the movements of the gigantic beast were getting slower and slower. The loss of its life force had greatly affected its physical strength. Its body seemed to have shrunk a little, and its originally glossy fur had become dull. This battle seemed to be the end of its life. After another few minutes, the gigantic beast let out a mournful howl and slowly fell to the ground. The candle flame of its life was getting dimmer and dimmer. 4 of the remnant body parts had stopped growing and were rapidly decaying. Finally, they turned into a pool of blood. Only one body was left, and it was still struggling to fight for its last chance of survival. The brush in Ma Hongyu's hand had already stopped and his breathing was slightly weak. In fact, he didn't consume much energy. The Empress looked at the wriggling mass of flesh and blood. Its organs, upper body, neck and head grew. Finally, it became an extremely old foreign race member. This seemed to have consumed the last of its energy. When all of this was completed, it fell to the ground and looked at the surrounding tribe that had been turned into ruins with eyes filled with anger and sorrow. Finally, it fixed its gaze on the Empress. With a strange tone that was filled with the deepest malice and resentment, it said, "Sinners, God will punish you. If your God really existed, you wouldn't have ended up like this," the Empress sneered. Dao had no god and only believed in ancestral spirits. However, there were legends about the existence of gods in Great Xia. The Empress had come into contact with myths and legends on Earth, so she wasn't unfamiliar with them. God will punish you, God will punish you, God will punish you. The remaining foreign race member continued to curse viciously, as if he was cursing a village woman. Seeing him like this, the Empress gradually lost interest. Previously, she spared his life because she wanted to see if this foreign race member had any other tricks up his sleeves. Previously, this foreign race member shared life with the gigantic beast, which had piqued her interest. Now it seemed like there wasn't any. Immediately, she smashed her fist into the air. The foreign race member didn't resist and immediately turned into a pile of flesh and blood. This time it didn't continue to grow. Chapter 1172. Look around and see if there's anything valuable. The Empress glanced at the remaining people. She looked down at the foreign being and saw that he had already become minced meat. All his belongings were destroyed in the battle just now. The Empress took a step forward and stood in the air. She looked around and headed straight for the largest house. Although the Earth Spirit's combat power wasn't high, he had some unexpected tricks up his sleeve. This was the ability to share life force with the giant beast. As long as the giant beast still had life force, it could survive even if it was beaten into minced meat. It could even split into several parts. If it weren't for the fact that the human race had the upper hand from the very beginning and had confined him to a small area, his strange ability might have caused some trouble for them. The Empress thought about it further. If she had this method in future battles with the foreign races, she could share life force with some soldiers and increase their combat power greatly. A wound on a vital part could take a human's life. However, this foreign being didn't have any vital parts. Its only weakness was that it consumed the life force of the giant beast to regrow its flesh. Before it regained its flesh, it was almost defenseless. Just like this foreign being, it didn't have a chance to recover from the beginning. However, this wasn't considered a weakness. If it were someone else, they would have died long ago. It would be extremely difficult to deal with an enemy like this on the battlefield. However, this special ability had extremely high requirements. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the only one in this tribe to have it. If it could be widely used, this mid-tier race with low combat power wouldn't be able to keep this special ability. However, they had to try and maybe find a way. Even if they couldn't, it would be good to learn something useful from it. In the past, this world didn't have planes, but they did now. After a while, the Empress took out a bag with all the animal skin booklets inside. What surprised her was that the alien race spoke the human language but used a different language. She had no idea what she had found inside. After she walked out, the house immediately collapsed, becoming the last piece of the puzzle in the ruins. The Empress turned to look at Xianqiu. Although most of the flesh had grown out of the hole in his chest, the injury to his lungs wasn't so easy to heal. Without a lung, his strength would be greatly reduced in the future. Return to the Wall of Two Worlds and walk 300 kilometers to the west. The humans will send you back to Dao. You might be able to recover from your injuries, the Empress said coldly. There were more than 130 Cardinal Heaven and Spirit Wheel experts, including 9 from Longevity Heaven and Heaven Opening Domain. They had launched a surprise attack on a tribe that only had 2 Longevity Heaven experts and more than 20 Cardinal Heaven experts. Yet, one of them was seriously injured, which made the Empress rather unhappy. Haha, it can be cured? Xianqiu grinned with his mouth that was filled with the smell of blood. It seemed that the injury to his lungs did not bother him too much. When we return, listen to the regent. Don't act recklessly or you will be killed, the Empress said coldly. This Xianqiu was truly unbridled. Back when he was in the Cardinal Heaven realm, he was already quite wild. Now that he was in the Longevity Heaven realm, not only did he not restrain himself, he was even more unbridled. It had nothing to do with his personality, nor was he intentionally arrogant or relying on his strength. Instead, most of the aboriginals in the depths of the 60,000 mountains were like this. Or rather, most of the aboriginals in the depths of the 60,000 mountains were like this. His entire body was filled with a ferocious and violent aura. Otherwise, he wouldn't have risked his life to fight the middle-level longevity heaven expert head-on. She could suppress him here, but if he returned to Dayo, given his violent temperament, he might cause some trouble. Therefore, the Empress specially warned him. Remember my words. If you cause any trouble, I will destroy your entire village. The Empress glanced at him coldly. Her sharp gaze made Xan Chao's skin feel as if it was being cut by a knife, but he didn't care much. The distance between the two foreign tribes was more than 250 kilometers. Even a Cardinal Heaven expert would need at least 4 to 6 hours to get there. If he conserved his strength, he would need at least 10 hours to get there. The Empress caught up with them halfway through the journey, and it was already close to noon. Xen, there's someone ahead about 25 kilometers away, Dongwasun suddenly said. Everyone immediately slowed down without the slightest doubt, even though it was difficult for Ma Hongyu and the other heaven-opening domain experts to detect them. However, Dongwasun was proficient in spying and assassination, and everyone knew that he had the ability to locate enemies from afar. About 100 people. Dongwasun, who looked like a young man in trousers, sniffled and said, Tao is brought by the wind from afar. The Empress turned her head and looked around. On one side was the Wall of Two Worlds, which was more than 3,000 meters tall, and on the other side was the land of fire poison that was difficult to see with one's eyes. It seems that the Jianghu tribe has really come to help. Let's wait for them here and wait for them. Ma Hongyu laughed. The Empress nodded and said, All right. There were less than 100 people from the foreign tribes, and there were only 3 longevity heaven experts in the Jianghu tribe. Without one of them, there were at most 2 of them, which posed no threat to them. 5 minutes later, Dongwasun suddenly exclaimed, raised his eyebrows and said, They have stopped. They are heading back very quickly. Have they discovered us? Dongwasun couldn't figure out how the other party had discovered them. However, the foreign tribes were strange, and he had just seen a monster that could regrow itself after being smashed into pieces. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the other party had extraordinary abilities. Chase after them. The Empress didn't hesitate at all. After a while, they caught up with the Jianghu tribe. Before they arrived, the Jianghu tribe had actually stopped and formed a formation. There were 4 rows of 22 people behind them, and the remaining 12 people were divided into 2 rows, with only 2 people standing at the front. This formation made everyone even more certain that the other party had already discovered their movements. The Jianghu tribe looked similar to humans, except that their faces and limbs were long and thin. There were bone spurs on their backs, and there was a pair of short daggers in each of their hands. The weaker the strength of the Jianghu tribe, the paler their bone spurs were. They had a metallic luster on them. The 2 longevity heaven experts' bone spurs were like dark metals, and they were black with a glossy luster. Leave 50 people behind. The rest go to the Jianghu tribe and don't let them escape, the Empress said without hesitation when she saw the enemies forming a formation. Since the other party could discover them in advance, they must have already sent a message back. As if they understood the Empress's words, the Jianghu tribe, which had already formed a formation, immediately let out a commotion. Go! An expert of the Jianghu tribe shouted. Kill! The Empress ordered coldly. Kill! The expert of the Jianghu tribe shouted. Many of the Jianghu tribe suddenly changed their formation, turned around and faced their opponents with their backs. Before they could react, the bone spurs on the backs of half of the Jianghu tribe suddenly detached from their bodies and shot toward them like arrows, covering most of them. Following this, the 4 rows of foreign races changed positions, and another batch of bone spurs shot over. That night, Renbachian found out that the 2 tribes had been annihilated. Apart from Xancho, 2 more people from the Jianghu tribe died, and more than 10 people were injured by the bone spurs. The combat strength of the Jianghu tribe was slightly higher than that of the Earth Spirit tribe, but the most troublesome thing was their bone spurs. They were extremely fast, even faster than bullets, and extremely sharp. They shot over from all directions, and there were also some bone spurs from the Cardinal Heaven level Jianghu tribe. If they were not careful, they would be injured. Furthermore, the Jianghu tribe was able to turn most of their bones into arrows before they died. If both parties were at the same level of strength, they would be shocked to encounter such a scene. The 2 experts who died were killed by them in this way. This made the Empress more vigilant. These mid-level Jianghu tribe members were already so difficult to deal with. She wondered how powerful the 36-strong Jianghu tribe members were. Although these two tribes weren't very powerful, they each had their own unique characteristics. For example, the Earth Spirit tribe's most powerful technique was their ability to coexist with ferocious beasts. If the Earth Spirit tribe and the ferocious beasts were entangled in front, the Jianghu tribe would probably suffer even more casualties if they attacked from afar. The Empress guessed that this was the reason why these two foreign races were guarding the wall of the two realms. Fortunately, with the elite strength of the human race, they were able to annihilate the two races separately with a crushing force. It was still relatively easy. If the army had encountered these two races in battle, they would probably have to be very distracted. Chapter 1173. After the Empress hung up, she suddenly said, "I'll go back in 2 days." Rinpochen was subconsciously shocked. Could it be that she still remembered that matter until now? Was she really going to come back from the wall of the two worlds to bite him? That couldn't be. "Your Majesty, do you miss me?" Rinpochen probed. Without waiting for the Empress to answer, he continued, "I miss you too." The Empress's mouth twitched and the words, "I want to bite you to death," were stuck in her throat. He didn't give her a chance to say them. "I'll go to Qing Valley to pick you up," Rinpochen said. "There's no need. Prepare a plane for me." The Empress hung up the phone after saying that. She pulled up her red muslin and saw a green mark that looked like an eye on her arm. The mark was on her arm, but it was covered by her sleeve. She didn't notice when it appeared. When she was on her way to the Thousand Bone tribe, she accidentally found this mark on her arm. After thinking about it, she guessed that it was most likely left behind by that expert from the Earth Spirit race. Before he died, he kept muttering, "God will punish you." She thought that it was his resentment before he died, but when she found this mark on her arm, her first thought was that it was his doing. It was quite strange that she didn't notice it at all. Although she didn't know what it was for, she guessed that it had something to do with the god that the Earth Spirit race had mentioned. God? There are no gods in this world. Even if there are, they aren't humans. The Empress looked at the mark on her arm and sneered. She rubbed her skin with her hand and couldn't feel anything. She put down her sleeve. However, she couldn't do anything about it. The Earth Spirit race wasn't very strong, but there must be something special about them to be able to become a medium-sized race. Therefore, the Empress planned to go back and ask Rinpochen to bring her back to Earth to see if he could remove the mark on her arm. Previously, Rinpochen could directly bring other people's heaven-grade weapons back to Earth and cut off contact with their original owners. This might be a solution. Somewhere in this world, within a mountain range, there was an endless chain of altars, distributed on the peak of every mountain. On each altar was a stone statue that was 100 meters tall. The stone statue looked down slightly as if it was overlooking the Earth Spirit race and the beasts walking at the bottom of the mountain. "Great Elder, one of our tribes has disappeared." An Earth Spirit wearing a crown studded with green gems walked in from a divine hall halfway up a mountain. "Which tribe?" An Earth Spirit clan elder wearing a necklace made of jade beads around his neck said in a deep voice in the hall. "It seems to be a tribe that split off a few thousand years ago. Their token is broken. Can you find the direction?" There has been no news of them for thousands of years, and the token suddenly shattered just now. "Great Elder, could it be the doing of the upper 36 clans?" "They have an agreement with us." The old man of the Earth Spirit clan remained silent for several breaths before he said, "Ask people to prepare the sacrificial offerings. Inform the deities of this matter in 10 days. The Black Sky God will definitely guide us and bring disaster to our enemies. No one can slaughter the people of the Black Sky God without being punished." 10 days later, offerings were placed on countless altars in the mountains. Countless Earth Spirits with one or more agate necklaces were kneeling in front of the altars, chanting all kinds of praises. Then, countless Earth Spirits formed a circle in front of the altars and danced. "Black Sky God, your people and descendants offer you endless piety and respect. Please guide us to find the murderers who slaughtered your people. Please guide us to bring endless disaster to our enemies." This kind of ceremony lasted for an entire day. Suddenly, a stone statue opened its mouth and spat out a black gem. "The Black Sky God has responded to us." The cheers suddenly spread from one mountain to another and then into the distance. All the mountains were in an uproar. The next day, the Great Elder threw the black gem to an Earth Spirit wearing a crown. "The enemies are in the northeast. This divine stone will guide you to find them and defeat them." "Yes, Great Elder. How many people should I bring?" The enemies are far away. Bring a group of warriors, and 5 giant beasts of disaster. I will inform the 36 clans. 3 days later, countless earth spirit warriors riding wild beasts galloped out of the mountains. The mountains trembled as they galloped. Behind the countless warriors of the earth spirit clan were 5 terrifying beasts that looked like moving mountains. In Dayo's imperial court, Rinpoche asked the guards to bring in boxes and place them in the hands of every minister. These are? Great Elder Shirqing opened the lid and immediately saw a total of 12 bottles inside. Each bottle contained a crystal that was the size of 2 fingers. Are these crystals? Tong Jingye used a small wooden clip in the box to pick out a crystal from the glass bottle. Immediately, an extremely abundant vitality rushed straight to his face. Tong Jingye took a few deep breaths, and his face revealed a satisfied expression as his body trembled. What a comfortable feeling. Tong Jingye murmured. Is this the environment outside the wall of the 2 realms like this? I want to resign and follow in Her Majesty's footsteps. Let's go. I won't send you off. I find you an eyesore. Qin Chuan's gloomy voice sounded from the side. Most of the people in the imperial court took out a crystal from the bottle. After feeling the abundant vitality emitted from it, they were quite satisfied and put it back into the bottle. Everyone was careful because this thing wasn't easy to obtain. They had waited for more than a year for this. Is this all? Tuan asked. It's too little. Also, why do I see more crystals from Great Elder and Young Elder than me? This was what most people were thinking. There were indeed too few crystals in the hands of everyone. According to what Rinpoche had said before, these crystals would only last for less than 2 months. After all, the number of crystals is limited, and it's impossible to supply them in large quantities. The 2 elders will each receive 12 crystals, the 6 ministers will each receive 11 crystals, the 24 ministers will each receive 10 crystals, and the deputy ministers will each receive 9 crystals, Rinpoche explained. In addition, the protectors of the 5 protectorates will each receive 11 crystals, and the deputy protectors will each receive 10 crystals. There are also some Cardinal Heaven experts who aren't officials but aren't Cardinal Heaven experts will each receive 5 crystals. There were less than 3,000 level 4 crystals in total. Using this method, more than 700 crystals were distributed at one time. These level 4 crystals could only be distributed 4 times at most, which was 2 years' time. As for whether it wasn't enough, everyone would have to think of a solution themselves. The ores that were sent back were only made into these crystals? Tuan was puzzled. There were a lot of ores sent back and everyone was paying attention to them. However, the amount produced was too little. This is part of it. This type of crystal was a 4th grade crystal. Below them are level 5 crystals. Rinpoche asked the guards to bring everyone a bottle containing a level 5 crystal. There are a total of 10,000 of these level 5 crystals. I will reward a portion of them to those who have made great contributions to the imperial court, regardless of their level of cultivation. Rinpoche smiled. For example, the people from the academy have made great contributions to the imperial court over the years. The changes in Dayo today are inseparable from them. I believe that all of you won't deny this, right? In addition to them, there are also some officials from various ministries who have made great contributions to the imperial court. The examination office has a tally of these people. Although the imperial court has already given them rewards, these crystals are another form of favor and recognition from the imperial court. Everyone nodded slightly as they couldn't find fault with this point. In addition, I want to hold a martial arts competition to select human elites who will be rewarded for training. I will also take out a portion of the crystals as the prizes for this competition. Can I participate? Qin Chuan suddenly asked. It wasn't just him. Many people in the imperial court also looked tempted. Rinpoche really wanted to ask if they were shameless. No, there is an age limit this time. We want to select young people with potential, especially those who don't have official positions and are wandering outside. If you have a capable nephew, you can let them participate, Rinpoche said with a sullen face. Finally, I will take out 5,000 crystals and sell them in the market. The money will be used to subsidize the investment in the south. Seeing that Rinpoche had arranged everything clearly, everyone was speechless. However, there was one more thing that Rinpoche didn't mention. There were still more than 800 level 3 crystals. If he did, these people would definitely be skinned alive. He was going to use them to reward those who had made great contributions in the future. Chapter 1174. In the lecture hall of the Black Bamboo Academy. Looking at the students sitting below with bright eyes, Rinpoche felt a sense of satisfaction. These young people were the future of this world and the fruits of his hard work over the years. There were Aboriginals, Jing tribe, and people from the Yin nation. As time went on, the number of people in these two areas increased. Rinpoche stood on the stage with a smile and spoke in a heavy voice. Knowledge is power. The fist is only the power of the physical body, but it can't move the world, while knowledge can. Armor can arm your body, but knowledge can arm your mind. The power of the physical body is only a narrow range, but the mind allows you to get close to the truth of the world through your knowledge, thereby becoming stronger and having a wider range of power. The power of the physical body brings destruction and ruins, while the power of knowledge brings prosperity and civilization, creation and value. Look at the capital today, look at this city, and think about the places you used to live and go. All of this is brought about by knowledge. Trains, cars, airplanes, electric lights, telephones, and projections. These are the values created by knowledge. The essence of knowledge is the changes we bring to this world when we understand the various phenomena of this world and search for the essence of the world. The Academy Award was created to reward those students who have made contributions in academia and realized their value in creation. You have brought a better side to this world. After finishing his speech and listening to the applause of the students below, Rinpoche paused for a moment before continuing. The Academy Award will be held annually in the future to reward those who have made outstanding contributions. Now, the award for the best industrial design of the year, research on the control method of an aero engine based on the Lyapunov function, by Shiryu. Tong Lan and Shirgan's expressions changed slightly as they looked at a girl in the same row. They didn't expect her to be the first winner of the Academy Award. A delicate and pretty girl in her 20s looked at Rinpoche in surprise and couldn't react for a moment. Don't just stand there. Go up. Su Ping poked her shoulder from behind. You will forever be remembered in the history of the Black Bamboo Academy, and your photo will be hung in the Hall of Fame. Rinpoche smiled. The Academy is proud of you. After Shiryu recovered from his shock, he ran up to the stage and heard those words. His eyes reddened and he almost cried. As a commoner student, he had gone from being illiterate to being the only commoner student in the bachelor's class. He had gone through a lot of hardships and temptations. The other commoner students had long since joined the workforce, and many of them had even become 6th or 5th rank officials in the Ministry of Works. They had long since improved their family situation. She was the only one who persisted and devoted herself to endless study and research. Many times she had thought of leaving the academy and working in various departments. Her family situation would be much better. It was just that she preferred the atmosphere in the academy and the process of constantly learning new knowledge. This sudden award made her feel that everything she had done before was worth it. He then picked up a box from the side and opened it to reveal a bottle. This was 50 crystals. The students below immediately revealed looks of envy, and the applause became even more intense. These days the news of origin crystals had already spread out. Or rather, it could be said that under Rinpoche's push, the news spread to everyone through the newspapers and other news channels. No one could ignore the value of origin crystals. It could increase the speed of cultivation. Just this alone was enough to make countless people go crazy. This was especially true for people who weren't Aboriginals. Before reaching the cardinal heaven level, origin crystals were valuable to the Aboriginals, but food with sufficient energy was more valuable. However, for the warriors of the Jing tribe and the Yin nation, origin crystals could be absorbed into the body and transformed into essence qi along with the blood essence, speeding up the speed of cultivation. For the warriors who had reached the earth embryo realm and began to interact with the outside world, this speed was greatly accelerated. It could even help increase the chances of breaking through the path to heaven. For the spirit and cardinal heaven level warriors, origin crystals were even more useful. Under such circumstances, how could the world not go crazy? However, origin crystals were currently only in the hands of a few people. Only the court officials who had reached the cardinal heaven level had a small amount of them. In the outside world, the price of origin crystals had already skyrocketed. Even level 5 origin crystals were the same. A level 5 origin crystal was equivalent to 100 taels of gold. These 50 origin crystals were equivalent to 5,000 taels of gold and 50,000 taels of silver. Coupled with entering the Academy's Hall of Fame, as long as one's name was recorded in history, how could the students not be envious? Thank you. Shiryu choked with sobs. You deserve it. Rinpoche smiled. The reason why this award was held in such a high-profile manner was partly to commend the students, but most importantly, it was to stimulate the enthusiasm of the students. As for whether sure you would get into trouble for possessing these origin crystals, Rinpoche believed that no one in the capital would dare to target the students of the academy. As for whether sure you would sell them, this was for sure because these origin crystals weren't very valuable to her. Sure Yu's talent could only be considered average. Besides, it would be better for the aboriginals to exchange the origin crystals for Earth-level beast meat. Furthermore, her family's situation would also improve. After all, Sure Yu came from an ordinary family and wasn't well off. In addition, Rinpoche wanted to inflate the price of the origin crystals so that he could release the remaining few thousand origin crystals. Sure Yu was just the beginning. Next is the Best Scientific and Technological Progress Award of the Year, some expansion of the hydrodynamic equation around the flow problem, Aerodynamic Research Group. This time it was a group of 4 people who were 1 year younger than Tonglan and the others. The 4 of them smiled very brightly. Although the origin crystals were very valuable to them, it was far less meaningful than the recognition of their research. After the 4 of them left, 2 more awards were handed out and it was time for the highlight. Next is the Most Valuable Award of the Year, Giant Automatic Circulation Control Calculator, Electric Machinery Group's Ancient Crystal, Ancient Water, and Xiong'en. Rinpoche announced loudly with a smile on his face. That's right, this was the biggest surprise he had recently received. The so-called Giant Automatic Circulation Control Calculator could actually be called a relay calculator. This was a real computer, the prototype of a modern computer. Although the researchers had done research on this and made much faster progress than the students, the researchers were all scientists that Rinpoche had abducted from various countries, and computers had long been integrated into their lives. They had sufficient understanding and cognition of computers, so Rinpoche placed the most important part in the research institute. However, the students of the academy were different. They didn't know much about computers and didn't even have a concept of them. It was just that a few of the students wanted to solve the large amount of data involved in their studies and research. As a result, they wanted to design a device that allowed them to be lazy. Although the giant calculator had a very slow speed of operation, only being able to perform addition and subtraction 4 times in 1 second and multiplication and division every 10 seconds, it could be said to be very primitive and slow. However, this couldn't hide the brilliance of wisdom that it was full of. From a certain perspective, lazy people could change the world. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Remember, Scholar House. Chapter 1175. After the Black Bamboo Academy Awards, it was time to reward the mid-level and low-level officials who had made outstanding contributions. For example, the officials from the Department of Commerce who had made great contributions to the promotion of the Jianghu fertilizer. The officials from the Public Order Bureau who had made great contributions to stopping the theft, robbery, of manhole covers. The officials from the Department of Transportation who had improved the situation of violent car racing on the highway from Lan City to Chuyan Prefecture. The supervisors who had strictly enforced the safety of the mines and ensured that there hadn't been any major casualties for 3 consecutive years. The names of a batch of low-level officials who weren't well known and didn't have high strength, but had performed well in their posts were published in the newspapers. And the prizes were all origin crystals. After the Black Bamboo Academy and the large-scale awards, the enthusiasm of the students and officials was fully aroused, and the enthusiasm of the market was also aroused. In particular, some crystals entered the market and were instantly placed on the desks of many officials, aristocratic families, and the upper echelons of the chambers of commerce. After confirming the effects of the crystals and their abundant vitality, even though the vitality released was limited and could only be used for a short period of time, it was still wildly sought after by the entire market. 1 crystal cost 100 taels of gold and could only be used for 1 day. However, it was extremely cost-effective for breaking through to the next level. For some people, money was never the most important issue. Seeing the popularity of the market, even some officials were tempted and wondered if they should sell a few of the level 4 crystals they had. At this time, Rinpoche put the remaining 5,000 crystals into the market. After limiting the number of individual purchases, they were sold out in just half a day, earning a huge income of 5 million taels of silver, which was used to increase the investment in the 60,000 mountains. If there were enough crystals, Rinpoche believed that even if the price was reduced to half today, The sales alone would be enough to maintain the rapid development of technological products and the construction of public facilities in Dayo. What is the soul? What is the spirit? What is the divine sense? This is the greatest mystery of mankind. On Earth, from religion to science, countless people have been guessing and searching, but there has never been a real conclusion. However, this world is different. The existence of the divine sense gives us the possibility to explore. Although the concept of the divine sense in this world has always been difficult for me to understand, I have asked many people, especially those who carry swords on their backs, and they seem to have mixed it up. However, in my opinion, this isn't the case. The divine sense, which I find very strange in this world, has a unique characteristic. His divine sense could actually interact with the external world, allowing him to become even stronger. Moreover, the divine sense was actually visible, touchable, and materialized. What was divine sense? Was it a soul? Why could it interact with the world? How could he condense a divine weapon? Your Highness, boss, you have to know that this is a real miracle. In the interaction between the divine sense and the outside world, what kind of process takes place that causes matter to appear? Your Highness, divine sense is what we need to study the most. This is God's domain. Thinking of this, my heart was about to jump out of my chest. I need research subjects. He fell into deep thought as he listened to the long-winded narration of the big-nosed woman. Not only did they want to know the answer to this question, but he also wanted to know the answer. In fact, he had a certain understanding of the soul, spirit, and divine sense. The way he saw it, the soul was the carrier of the spirit, the existence of a person. Spirit, on the other hand, was the fluctuation of the soul. It was a process of one's thoughts and perception. However, divine sense was different from the other two. The soul consciousness was the method and means for the soul to perceive everything. It was the hands and feet of the soul, and it was the extroversion of the soul. This distinction was very subtle and easy to confuse. He didn't know if he was right. In fact, he was very interested in this research and had this idea for a long time. It was just that he didn't have the ability, the time, or the appropriate tools for observation and detection. Now that vitality had been discovered and some tools could be made, it was time to start research in this area. Although most of the experts who had condensed the divine weapon had gone to the Lansang territory to fight against the foreign races, there were still a few suitable candidates. You can leave first. I will consider this matter. Rinpochen waved his hand. After thinking for a while, he contacted Li Yuanzhu and invited her to the capital. On one hand, it was to discuss the youth competition. Without her, it would be difficult to expand the scope to Great Xia. On the other hand, it was to use the Yuan crystals. After all, Li Yuanzhu had to stay in Great Xia to guard the internal affairs. Otherwise, she would have already become a heaven and earth region expert. As a top genius who wasn't inferior to the Empress, she was more important than the ministers in the imperial court. Finally, she was invited to participate in some research work. Well, to be studied. Moreover, there was Lin Yu by her side. Her mind and body were seriously out of line, and the Wi-Fi signal for her mind was intermittent. Presumably, she would make outstanding and unparalleled contributions to the research work. There was a radio station at Li Yuanzhu's place and a person who specialized in receiving information from the radio station. It didn't take long for her to receive a definite reply. Of course, she still didn't know what the so-called research work was. After finishing this, he got someone to inform Honeysuckle and the ministers in the imperial court. He also got someone to wake up Lin Xiaola, who had been sleeping for decades, and prepared to make a trip to the Yin residence. Wang Jing. He only brought a team of guards and Lin Xiaola with him. Now that he was at the Earth Embryo realm, he had enough ability to protect himself. There weren't many experts left in either Great Xia or the Yin nation. An hour later he got on a plane to Wangjing. This wasn't a mature route, and even the airport in Wangjing was very simple. Other than a low brick building outside the city, there were only 2 runways that had just been repaired. Everyone boarded the plane with a parachute and was ready to jump at any time. Fortunately, there weren't any problems along the way except for the terrible flight experience. 5 hours later, Rinpochen felt like his body was about to fall apart. He swayed his body parts as he boarded the car to welcome the team. It was already afternoon, and he first went to the palace of the Yin nation. This was his first time here. The remaining eunuchs were guarding this huge building complex. The dilapidated buildings had been lacking maintenance for more than a decade. From time to time they would see dust and lifeless palaces. All of this indicated that the Yun nation had long been swept clean of history. Early the next morning, Renbachin went to the seaside and looked at the two giant steel ships docked near the huge dock. The so-called giant steel ships were just two steam ships that were about 140 meters long, 13 meters wide, and had a displacement of 3,400 tons. They were powered by two diesel engines with a power of 72,000 horsepower. In terms of size, they were far inferior to the Titanic, which sank during its first voyage in the early 20th century. That cruise ship, which sailed in 1912, was 269 meters long and had a displacement of 66,000 tons. However, compared to this world where humans were limited to a range of 1,000 meters from the coast, where the maritime industry was extremely undeveloped and the exploration rate of the ocean was extremely low, these two ships could already be considered behemoths. They were also the most advanced ships. Even though it was early in the morning, there were many people near the dock talking about the two giant steel ships in the distance. This popularity hadn't stopped for the past month. Previously, trains and cars, which were made of steel and didn't require animal power to run, had already shocked the people of the Yun nation. Now even the ships were made of steel. Just like the history on Earth, the most discussed topic was why the steel ships didn't sink and how they could move without sails and oars. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.